Emmeline confronts Lord Damien at the tea party, demanding to know why he brought another woman to an event they were supposed to attend together. Desperate to salvage the situation, she reminds him that breaking their engagement threatens the political ties to the Marquis Garrett family. She reflects on the Garrett lineage's powerful magic and how her uncle's death left her as the sole direct heir to the family head. Since she possesses absolutely no magic, the marriage was arranged so Damien's strong power could protect the territory in her stead. Emmeline warns him that ending their engagement would completely nullify the succession plan essential for the family's future. She presses further, asking what will become of the frontier territory if the alliance between their families crumbles. Damien snaps at her to shut up, furious that she would speak so lightly of such weighty matters. Glaring with contempt, he asks if a useless girl without magic dares to lecture him. He turns his back on her in disgust, leaving Emmeline stunned by his unbelievable cruelty. She falls silent, realizing she offers nothing but her bloodline while the Marquis truly desires Damien's magic. The situation feels utterly ridiculous as the weight of her powerlessness settles in. The other women mock her openly, questioning who an incompetent girl thinks she is to talk back to Lord Damien. Emmeline stands humiliated as the crowd laughs, knowing this torment exists solely because she lacks power. Ignoring her completely, Damien leads his companion away to chat elsewhere. He pauses only to glare, asking how long she plans to stand there in his way. Emmeline clenches her fists and retreats, realizing she has no choice but to back down for the moment. She bows her head in defeat, apologizing to Damien for making him uncomfortable. While she only wants him to take responsibility for the house, Damien sneers and calls her pathetic. He delivers a final insult, branding her a useless and worthless noble lady before walking away. The cruel label of worthless noble lady strikes Emmeline deep, leaving her shocked. The surrounding nobles join the mockery, laughing that the title suits her perfectly while she blushes in shame. The chorus of worthless lady echoes around her as they brand her the shame of the Marquis family. Emmeline digs her nails into her palm, fighting to stay calm and not react to the abuse. Composing herself, she offers a polite goodbye and turns away from the sneering crowd. She walks away through the estate, telling herself she is used to being mocked by now. Although the laughter lingers in her ears, she forces herself to keep moving forward. Emmeline approaches the gate where her carriage awaits. The knight greets her, noting that she has returned quite early from the party. She recognizes him as Bart, her personal knight and loyal protector. Overwhelmed by the day's events, tears suddenly spill from her eyes as she looks at him. Bart is startled, his expression shifting to concern as he sees her distress. Emmeline covers her mouth, embarrassed to let him see her cry when she didn't mean to. Bart gently suggests they go home, offering her a way to escape the situation. Offering his hand with a warm smile, he helps her toward the carriage and tells her to watch her step. Emmeline realizes with relief that he isn't going to ask her anything about what happened. She accepts his hand, grateful for his silence and support. She thanks him internally, touched that he always treats her the same regardless of her status or failures. Wiping her tears, she smiles softly and agrees to head home. She steels her resolve, determining not to let this humiliation drag her down. The story shifts to the next morning at the Cresswell estate. Russell Cresswell chats happily at dinner, boasting that his sword instructor praised his skills and he will advance to harder lessons. Camilla Cresswell praises her son warmly while Viscount Ward Cresswell nods in approval, acknowledging Russell's hard work. The family laughs together in a warm bubble of happiness while Emmeline sits silently at the same table, completely excluded. Emmeline eats quietly, resigning herself to the fact that she is always treated as if she doesn't exist. She recalls a time when things were different and her life wasn't filled with this cold isolation. In her memories, her family was happy and her father was kind while her mother was still alive. After her mother passed, her father remarried immediately, and Russell's birth pushed Emmeline to the sidelines. She accepts the harsh reality that the talented Russell and her useless, magicless self are treated differently. Cutting into her food, she acknowledges that understanding the reason doesn't stop the treatment from hurting. Ward abruptly breaks the silence, demanding to know if she is listening and asking about her fiancé. Emmeline forces a polite smile, lying that there are no problems and apologizing for her silence. She knows that telling the truth about Damien's cruelty would only result in her being blamed for everything. Ward reveals he already knows she angered Lord Damien yesterday by speaking out of turn, having heard the rumors. He glares at her with intensity, demanding an explanation for why she caused such trouble. Camilla feigns shock and embarrassment, claiming she was speechless when she heard the news from an acquaintance. She scolds Emmeline for the disgrace, while Emmeline quietly murmurs that she has already apologized. Camilla cruelly laments the embarrassment of having such a worthless stepdaughter who brings shame to the family. Ward strictly orders Emmeline to mind her behavior, reminding her that no man but her fiancé would marry a girl without magic. Emmeline lowers her head in submission, knowing that no one in this house would ever take her side seriously. The mood instantly shifts as Camilla cheerfully suggests having lunch in the garden, completely ignoring the previous tension. Emmeline stands up and excuses herself, claiming she has other business to attend to so she can escape. The family continues their happy conversation about tea and lunch, barely acknowledging her departure. She exits the room with a polite bow, telling herself she only has to endure this for a little while longer. Emmeline understands their only use for her is to secure the marriage to Damien so she can finally leave the house. She focuses on her duty to uphold her late mother's memory as the sole heir of the Garrett bloodline. Vowing not to fail the people of the frontier or her family, she steels her resolve to protect them. A maid greets Emmeline respectfully as she returns to the quiet safety of her own quarters. Alma and her brother Bart welcome her back, with Alma noting that her lady looks exhausted. Alma serves a cup of herbal tea, hoping it will help ease Emmeline's accumulated stress. Emmeline thanks them warmly, thinking that these two servants are the only people who truly care for her. Alma looks at her mistress with concern, hesitating before asking to speak her mind. She expresses her frustration, stating that she believes the Lord is treating Emmeline far too coldly. Emmeline tries to rationalize the abuse, insisting it is simply because she possesses no magic. Alma protests passionately, arguing that it is cruel for a father to treat his own blood daughter worse than a stranger. Emmeline smiles reassuringly, telling Alma not to worry because she got used to the treatment long ago. She explains that in a few months she will turn 15 and finally move to the Marquis household. Setting her cup down, she acknowledges that even then, she will still be without magic. Emmeline determines that she will simply have to work harder to make herself useful despite her lack of power. Bart closes his eyes and vows solemnly that whatever happens, he will always stand by her side. Alma joins her brother in the pledge, assuring Emmeline that they will serve her always. Emmeline looks at her loyal servants with gratitude, acknowledging that they have supported her for so long. She recalls how her late mother brought them into the home, cementing their place by her side ever since. Grasping her arm, she confesses that their presence is the only reason she can keep going. She smiles warmly, declaring that to her, they are like true siblings. Bart and Alma stand stunned, blushing slightly at their mistress's heartfelt declaration. Alma bows her head, asking forgiveness for her boldness while admitting they feel exactly the same way. Duty calls as Emmeline announces Damien's mother is calling, prompting Bart to prepare the carriage while Alma readies her attire. Emmeline reveals the summons is an invitation to a tea party. She physically shakes off her dread, telling herself she must keep her composure and not look downcast. Bart holds the carriage door open, watching intently as Emmeline steps inside. She flinches as emotions surge, but quickly snaps at Bart to just bring out the carriage, insisting it is nothing. Bart stares silently after her, his expression darkened by deep concern. Outside, Alma observes that attending the party is walking into torment, noting how Emmeline puts on a brave face. Bart grimly adds that even if she goes to the Marquis household, nothing will change for the better. He envisions her kneeling on the floor, knowing she will only keep being mocked for having no magic. Frustration eats at him as he admits there is truly nothing more he can do to help her. Bart clenches his fist in self-loathing, cursing his own powerlessness as disgraceful. Alma looks at him with understanding, quietly agreeing with his painful assessment. A silent narration reveals that Bart has loved his lady ever since they were children. The carriage rattles away as Alma bows, wishing her lady safe travels. Inside the moving carriage, Emmeline steels her resolve, focusing on her duty to protect the frontier. She sits with dignified poise, determining that she must do whatever she can despite the odds. The story continues at the Bonham estate. Lady Celia Bonham immediately sets a hostile tone, announcing coldly that her son will not be coming today either. Celia blames Emmeline entirely for the fiancé's absence and the resulting awkwardness, forcing Emmeline to apologize amidst the trials. Despite the cold reception, Emmeline maintains her composure and politely states she is simply grateful for the invitation. Celia complains that the tea party, ostensibly held to strengthen ties, has become rather dull because of Emmeline's presence. She cruelly speculates that Damien isn't showing his face because he is undoubtedly busy trysting with other women. Emmeline tries to shift the mood to maintain good terms, wondering internally if Damien ever thinks of the shame he brings upon his house. Attempting to diffuse the tension, Emmeline compliments the estate, noting that the gardens are always a stunning sight to behold. Celia dismisses the compliment about the radiant flowers immediately, stating that such things do not matter right now. Her expression hardening, Celia declares that there are plenty of things she needs to say to Emmeline directly. Emmeline listens submissively, accepting the coming lecture with a quiet yes. The Countess attacks Emmeline's appearance, calling her makeup outdated and claiming she lacks the charm to make Damien settle down. Raising a hand to emphasize her point, Celia warns her that there is still more criticism to come. She accuses Emmeline of meddling in affairs she shouldn't and lacking basic refinement, questioning why anyone would want such a fiancé. Emmeline promises to do her best, but Celia smugly retorts that she must make an effort if she doesn't want to be cast off. Internally, Emmeline admits she struggles with refinements because no one taught her, yet she wonders if her previous words were truly wrong. When Celia presses her for a response, Emmeline denies having anything to say despite looking like she wants to object. She steels herself, repeating the internal mantra that she must not talk back to her hostess. Emmeline resolves to endure the verbal abuse with a smile, no matter what insults are thrown her way. Suddenly, Cameron Bonham intervenes, questioning if her mother is truly being remorseful. The narrative introduces Cameron Bonham, the eldest daughter, who warns that her mother will make Emmeline feel bad. Cameron chides her mother for placing all the blame on Emmeline and then compliments Emmeline's beauty. She seemingly defends Emmeline, noting that her brother's behavior shows absolutely no regard for his fiancée. Emmeline is stunned, wondering if Cameron is actually standing up for her. Cameron reveals her arrogance, laughing that as the fourth prince's fiancée, she could handle the situation far better than Emmeline. She mocks Emmeline for never being courted and calls her simply terrible with men. Realizing Cameron only wants to boast and mock her, Emmeline denies the insults while Cameron continues to snicker. Emmeline decides to play along for the sake of the engagement, knowing a breakup would trouble everyone. The other ladies chime in, praising Cameron for being chosen among so many noble women. Cameron preens, stating it is only natural for a talented and beautiful daughter like her to be selected. She laughs cruelly, contrasting herself with a certain someone who has nothing but a bloodline to boast of. As the group laughs at Emmeline's expense, she stands silent and humiliated by Cameron's excessive mockery. Cameron scoffs that the Bonham duty is to serve the crown, while Emmeline's duty is merely to struggle in the dirt of the frontier. Leaning in close and touching Emmeline's hair, Cameron smiles with malicious intent. The words hang in the air as Cameron begins her final insult with the description of a remote place. Cameron finishes the thought with a sneer, declaring that a rural backwater like that suits Emmeline perfectly. The shock of the insult ripples through the air, leaving the room in a state of stunned disbelief. Emmeline realizes they are not just mocking her, but insulting the frontier itself and the sacred duty of the Marquis family. She sees clearly that the Bonham family holds no respect for the role Damien is meant to inherit or the weight of that responsibility. Trembling with realization, she asks herself how she can possibly entrust her future to people who despise her legacy. Flustered by a sudden social confrontation, the noblewoman struggles to maintain her composure while another lady questions her obvious distress with a teasing smile. Resigning herself to a difficult fate, she internally admits that without magic to protect the frontier, she has no choice but to rely on Damien's strength despite the cost. Masking her inner turmoil with a practiced and polite smile, she excuses herself from the suffocating conversation to escape the prying eyes. The moment she steps away, her facade crumbles into exhaustion as she admits she was too upset to even force a smile for the crowd. Her loyal guard Bart approaches as she laments the heavy burden of bearing her struggle alone with no one to rely on for support. Determined not to worry her protector, she hides her pain, though Bart immediately senses something is wrong and asks if she is all right. She lies that the event went smoothly, but Bart sees through the deception and keenly notes that Lord Damien was absent from the gathering. Realizing the neglect, Bart deduces with frustration that Damien must have been with another woman instead of attending to his duty. Bart seethes with anger, but she insists that complaining is useless and she must endure the humiliation to keep the engagement intact. As she prepares to board the carriage, Bart stops her with a hesitating but intense question regarding her state of mind. She pauses, taken aback by the sudden seriousness and lack of formality in his expression. Bart confronts her directly, demanding to know if she truly intends to keep accepting this cruel mistreatment forever without fighting back. Stunned by his outburst, she wonders in silence if his intense reaction stems from genuine anger towards her situation. Unable to hold back his feelings any longer, Bart firmly declares that he cannot accept seeing her treated this way. He lists the indignities she suffers, from being made a laughingstock to being ignored and looked down upon simply because she lacks magic. Shouting with raw emotion, Bart grabs her attention and asks why she must suffer in silence when she doesn't have to endure it. Overwhelmed by his intensity, she stammers and looks away, whispering that she cannot accept breaking the status quo. She stares at him in confusion, unable to comprehend why he would challenge the way things are. She explains that she chose to kill her heart because it is only natural for a non-magic user to be treated coldly in this world. Despite her logical defense, a crack forms in her resolve as she whispers a contradiction to her own accepted fate. Gazing at his back, she internally questions why he is getting so angry for her sake when she has already given up on herself. She realizes with fear that if he continues to show her such warmth and protection, her emotional walls will shatter. Tears threaten to spill as she acknowledges that his kindness will make her cry again, breaking the numbness she cultivated. Bart gently touches her hair, murmuring that he cannot bear to keep watching her suffer like this any longer. Clenching his fist in frustration, he struggles to contain the overwhelming urge to save her from her miserable reality. In a moment of raw honesty, he blurts out that he would rather just take her away somewhere far from here. Shocked by his own words, he immediately freezes and asks for forgiveness while she stands there wondering what he truly meant. Regaining his composure, Bart offers a gentle, inviting smile and suggests they head back to the estate. Still processing the emotional moment, she hesitantly agrees and reaches out to take his offered hand. As their hands connect, she focuses entirely on the comforting warmth radiating from his palm against hers. Overwhelmed by the intimacy of the moment, she finds herself unable to look him in the eyes as she enters the carriage. The ride becomes a blur as she finds herself obsessively thinking about his earlier suggestion to leave everything behind. Her mind wanders to a vivid fantasy of living peacefully with Bart, just the two of them in an unknown place. Snapping back to reality, she chides herself for entertaining such a scandalous and impossible thought. A deep blush spreads across her face as the weight of her daydream settles in and flusters her. Covering her mouth to hide her expression, she trembles and asks herself what this confusing new feeling is. Softly, she whispers Bart's name, realizing her heart has started to change in response to his care. Emmeline sits at her desk in the Cresswell residence, sighing deeply as she finds herself completely unable to focus on her studies. Her mind drifts back to Bart's tender words, wishing he could whisk her away to somewhere safe. No matter how hard she tries to study, his voice echoes in her head and refuses to leave her be. Deciding to take a break, she reaches for a bell to summon Alma but clumsily knocks over the inkwell. Horror washes over her as the black liquid spreads across the desk, ruining the open book in front of her. She stares helplessly at the stained pages, feeling like a failure even in the safety of her own room. Amidst the mess, a sudden realization strikes her that she has fallen in love with her personal knight, Bart. Shame floods her cheeks as she recalls sobbing in front of him, dying of embarrassment at the memory. She realizes she can no longer take his hand casually now that she understands the true weight of her feelings. As she frantically tries to clean the ink, she wonders anxiously what Bart thinks of her after her emotional display. Bart suddenly enters the room, startling Emmeline so much she lets out a yelp as he asks if she is hurt. He explains that the Viscount summoned Alma, so he came to check on her and immediately offers to clean the mess. Panic rises in her chest as she refuses his help, desperate to hide her flustered face from him. Bart watches her flee the room with a confused expression, unsure why his lady is acting so strangely. Emmeline rushes into the garden to cool her head, cursing herself for making such an obvious and awkward escape. She stops in her tracks, realizing just how suspicious her sudden departure must have appeared to him. Voices from the hallway catch her attention, revealing maids gossiping about their shared interest in Bart. Emmeline freezes, her heart pounding as she realizes she is not the only one who sees his appeal. The maids gush over his handsome face and incredible sword skills, calling him the most promising knight. It dawns on Emmeline for the first time that her personal knight is actually quite popular among the staff. She listens silently, her hands clasped tight as the conversation takes a more serious turn. One of the maids chastises the others, telling them they don't understand the reality of Bart's situation. She points out that because Bart serves Emmeline directly, he can never expect a glittering career or future. The words strike Emmeline like a physical blow, widening her eyes in shock at the harsh truth. The other maids fall silent, agreeing somberly that his potential is being wasted in his current role. They lament that he plans to play bodyguard forever when he is skilled enough to join the royal guard. Their pity for poor Bartsema stings Emmeline, especially when they mention he is stuck with the incompetent lady. The cruel verdict is delivered that it is as if the lady has stolen his life and future from him. Emmeline stands devastated in the garden, questioning if her presence is indeed a cage that traps him. She wonders if she should release him from her service to let his talent flourish as it deserves. A painful realization hits that she has been clinging to him to avoid facing her incompetent life alone. She admits to herself that she has been selfish, only thinking about her own comfort and safety. Tears well in her eyes as she apologizes internally to Bart for being such a hopeless and burdensome master. She resolves that she doesn't deserve to love him if it means putting her own needs ahead of his bright future. Despite the pain of this realization, she forces herself to walk back, determined to face reality. The next morning arrives at the estate, but Emmeline notices immediately that Bart is not at his usual post. She wanders the halls looking for him, scolding herself for being so dependent on his presence. The sharp sound of clashing swords draws her attention toward the training grounds outside. She spots Bart sparring with a group of men and calls out his name in surprise. To her absolute shock, crackling energy surrounds his blade, making her wonder if she is seeing magic. Bart strikes with lightning speed, declaring his opponent too slow as he dominates the training session. His eyes narrow with intense focus, channeling his power into the strike without hesitation. The opponent yields in defeat while Emmeline watches in awe, blushing as she realizes no one can beat Bart. She stands captivated by his strength, her heart pounding in her chest as the duel concludes. Bart notices her presence and greets her politely, confirming he has been training hard since morning. He vows that he must get stronger specifically to protect her, affirming his dedication to her safety. Emmeline hesitates, shifting the topic to something that has been weighing on her mind. She asks directly if he has nobles among his ancestors, sensing something unusual about his abilities. She explains that she saw his magic leaking during the fight, leading her to suspect noble blood. Bart admits he was born with a tiny trace of magic, though not enough to use like the nobility, so he adapts it for combat. Emmeline accepts his explanation simply, processing the revelation about his hidden power. A gentle, appreciative smile spreads across her face as she looks at him with warmth. She praises him for always being so dedicated, while he silently struggles with his deeper feelings. Internally, Bart swears he would never hand her over to a trash man like Damien, wishing he were truly a noble. Emmeline catches him murmuring and asks if he said something, breaking his train of thought. He quickly covers his slip with a smile, assuring her it was nothing. As they walk, Emmeline thinks that Bart, possessing both sword skill and magic, shouldn't be stuck at her side. She ruthlessly reminds herself that harboring romantic feelings for Bart is pointless. Duty binds her, as she recalls she must marry Damien to preserve the Marquis bloodline. Her eyes betray a deep sadness as she resigns herself to the path laid out for her. Suddenly stopping, she turns back to Bart with a burning question she needs to ask. She asks him if he is truly fine with things remaining exactly as they are. The atmosphere grows heavy as the unspoken tension between their stations lingers in the silence. A moment of stillness passes, emphasizing the gravity of the potential change in their relationship. Bart looks at her with a confused smile, asking her to repeat herself. She tells him that he does not have to accompany her to the Marquis house. Their conversation is interrupted by the maid Alma, who runs in breathless and panicked. Alma announces the shocking news that Lord Damien is here and demands to see Emmeline immediately. Emmeline freezes in disbelief, questioning why Damien would be here now. Noting he has never visited before, she wonders about his timing but orders him to be shown in. Entering the parlor, she finds Damien relaxing on the sofa as he greets her with a casual hello. He claims he has come to clear up a misunderstanding, setting a tense tone for the encounter. Damien arrives with a smug smile, claiming he has come specifically to clear up a misunderstanding with her. Emmeline is bewildered by his sudden appearance, noting that he has never once visited her estate before until this very moment. Damien feigns ignorance about past events, asking what misunderstanding occurred while Emmeline stands nervously beside her guard. He condescendingly suggests she misunderstood the tea party, emphasizing that he traveled all this way just for her sake. Damien explains that the lady he brought was extremely sociable and he simply wanted Emmeline to learn from her example. Emmeline realizes he only came to protect his own image, fearing that letting her apologize alone would damage his reputation. He scolds her for never trying to entertain him, demanding to know why she won't make an effort when he goes out of his way for her. Emmeline clenches her hands, knowing the expected response is to apologize and promise to try harder. However, she freezes, realizing that while her old self would have submitted, she cannot bring herself to say those words now. Damien stares her down coldly, impatiently commanding her to say the apology he expects. Standing beside Bart, Emmeline admits deep down that she still hasn't given up on him. She immediately shakes her head, telling herself that thinking that way is wrong and she must suppress those feelings. Steel resolves within her as she questions if she would really abandon the frontier for a hopeless love, telling herself to stay strong. She clasps her hands tightly, resolved to do what must be done, while Bart whispers her name in concern. Emmeline begins to address Lord Damien to ask for forgiveness, but suddenly her voice falters. Damien asks what is wrong as Emmeline sways unsteadily, clutching her head as a sudden pain strikes her. A sharp throb pierces her mind and her vision snaps as a realization or memory forces its way through. She recalls a vivid memory of her mother on a sickbed, urging her to never forget a crucial piece of advice. Damien yells at her not to ignore him, oblivious to the distress clearly visible on her face. He aggressively grabs her shoulder and demands to know if she is listening, causing her to cry out in shock. Bart intervenes instantly, grabbing Damien's arm to stop him while Emmeline looks on in surprise. Damien is outraged by the interference, shouting at the guard and demanding to know what he thinks he is doing. Bart coldly orders Damien to leave for the day, stating firmly that his lady is not feeling well. Damien argues that she is his fiancée and Bart shouldn't decide on his own, but Bart counters that he should treat her with more care. Bart extends his hand toward Emmeline, silently offering his support and protection. He sweeps her up into a princess carry, holding her close while flowers seem to bloom in the atmosphere around them. Emmeline blushes intensely, her heart pounding in her chest as she looks up at Bart's determined face. Bart gently announces that he will take her to her room, ignoring Damien's presence. He dismisses Damien by telling him to leave and advises Emmeline to rest for a while. Damien watches them with a dark realization, sneering that a mere dog is in love with his master. Emmeline looks confused by the situation while Bart sweats nervously, his face tense. Damien laughs to himself, finding it amusing that a lowly commoner is pining after the woman destined to be his wife. He turns on his heel with a scoff, preparing to exit the room now that he has deduced the situation. Bart declares he is leaving for today and carries Emmeline out of the room, leaving a stunned Damien behind. Emmeline considers Damien's accusation a delusion but admits to herself that she would be happy if it were actually true. She stares up at him with wide, flushed eyes as Bart calls out to her gently. Bart asks if she is hurt anywhere and sighs with evident relief when she assures him she is fine. Emmeline thanks him as he insists on taking her to her room, realizing he is just the same worried Bart as always. She tells herself he was only worried and she cannot expect anything more as he carries her down the hall. Yet she clutches his shirt tightly, allowing herself to indulge in his warmth just for tonight. Damien arrives the next day with a bouquet of vivid red roses, complimenting how they match her hair. He abruptly suggests a trip to town, promising to buy her whatever she desires, leaving Emmeline confused by the sudden gesture. Emmeline tries to decline, stating she has no need for anything, but Damien insists she shouldn't hold back. He casually adds that her guard can come along, asking if that makes the arrangement acceptable. Although suspicious of his motives, Emmeline feels a flicker of happiness at the thought of Bart joining them. She glances at Bart for confirmation, and he silently agrees to the outing. Bart formally states that he will accompany her, his expression serious and protective. Damien roughly shoves past Bart with a scoff, ordering everyone to get into the carriage immediately. Upon arrival, they walk through the bustling town, drawing murmurs and attention from the crowd. Damien forces Emmeline close to him, making her uncomfortable with his sudden and public display of affection. He spots a high-end shop and decides it looks suitable for their shopping trip. Damien arrogantly notes the shop is filled with goods that commoners could never afford. With a cruel sneer, he orders the filthy dog Bart to wait outside while they enter. Dismissing Emmeline's preferences, Damien declares she has no taste and he will pick everything out for her. He rapidly selects a dress, shoes, and a necklace, orchestrating her entire appearance. Handing her the items, he commands her to go change in the fitting room immediately. Emmeline emerges in the new gown, and Damien assesses her with a satisfied smirk. He delivers a backhanded compliment, remarking that even someone like her looks decent when draped in luxury. Asserting his ownership, he reminds her that she is his fiancée and shouldn't worry about the cost. Emmeline feels burdened by the extravagance, thinking that such luxury doesn't suit her at all. Damien leads her out to show her off to Bart, asking if she doesn't look completely transformed. Bart stands in silence, his expression unreadable as he gazes at her new appearance. Emmeline feels a pang of shame, hating that Bart has to see her dressed entirely in Damien's taste. Damien abruptly decides he is tired and suggests they rest at a nearby cafe. Seated, Damien mentions that monsters at the frontier are growing more active, frightening Emmeline. She expresses hope that nothing strange is happening, acknowledging the spreading rumors. Damien arrogantly asks if she fears monsters, boasting that with his magic, they are nothing. He takes a jab at Bart, claiming the guard would be useless against such threats unlike himself. Emmeline sits in silence, wondering why Damien is so intent on picking fights with Bart. Leaving the cafe, Damien pulls her close again, causing her to cry out in surprise. He mocks Bart, asking if she saw the dog's face, while Emmeline begs him to stop. Damien laughs cruelly, noting that Bart looked like he was about to cry. He relishes the idea that watching his precious master be taken must burn Bart up inside. With disdain, he declares it impossible for a commoner to dare love a noblewoman. He justifies his cruelty by claiming he simply taught Bart his place in the world. Emmeline stares at him in shock, her eyes widening as the realization hits her. She understands that this entire outing and sudden kindness were only because he viewed her as his property. He wanted to prove to Bart that she belonged to him, driven by a fear that she might be stolen. She creates a distance in her mind, disgusted by how childish his motivations truly are. Damien misinterprets her silence, assuming she is tired of Bart clinging to her. He lifts her chin, forcing her to look at him, and asserts that the one she loves is him, her fiancé. His eyes darken with a silent threat, warning that he will never forgive her if she claims to love anyone else. Emmeline realizes with horror that Damien has the power to disgrace Bart and drive him away from knighthood. She accepts that there is only one answer to prevent Bart from being ruined. Forcing the words out, she lies and tells Damien that she cares for him. Internally, she vows to protect Bart, sacrificing her own feelings to keep him safe. Annoyed by Bart's attitude, Damien turns his hostility toward the guard, forcing Emmeline to intervene by declaring she cares for the noble. She resolves to obey Damien as his fiancé, realizing that bearing her feelings is the only way to protect Bart from his wrath. Emmeline bids a formal farewell, and the scene shifts to a few days later where a carriage awaits in the courtyard. Maids whisper in the background, noting with concern that the lady must be exhausted from attending so many consecutive outings. Bart listens in silence as a maid questions why Lord Damien insists on inviting Emmeline out every single day. Upon their return, Bart steps forward and extends his hand to help Emmeline down from the carriage. Emmeline freezes in hesitation as Bart politely asks if he may have her hand. She realizes with dread that if she takes his hand now, she will lose the strength to hold back her surging feelings. Steeling her heart, she sharply pulls away and ignores his offered hand completely. Bart looks stunned as Emmeline walks past him, coldly stating that there is no need for his assistance. She retreats into her room and shuts the door, leaving Bart standing alone in the hallway. Bart remains motionless in the corridor, his expression hidden in shadow as the rejection sinks in. Later, while having her hair brushed, Emmeline sits in a heavy silence that prompts her maid to speak. The maid hesitantly asks for permission to ask a question, sensing the gloomy atmosphere. When Emmeline inquires why, the maid asks if her brother Bart has somehow offended the lady. She explains that she couldn't help but notice how incredibly awkward the two of them looked together earlier. The maid reveals that Bart has been acting like he lost his soul, wandering around completely absent-minded lately. Emmeline admits to herself that she has been deliberately avoiding any conversation with him for days. She knows that if she interacts with him, her resolve to keep her distance will inevitably crumble. Aloud, she quickly denies the maid's suspicion, insisting that Bart has done absolutely nothing wrong. Turning away, she tells herself that the only one at fault is her own weak self. Damien clicks his tongue in irritation during another shopping trip, criticizing her lack of taste as pointless. The next day, Emmeline endures yet another shopping excursion, wondering in despair how long this torture will continue. As they walk, Townspeople whisper anxiously about rumors that monsters are becoming more active near the frontier. Panic suddenly erupts as people scream that a shop is being attacked, realizing the rumors are true. In the chaos, Emmeline loses her footing and collapses hard onto the cobblestone street. Instead of helping her, Damien glares down in anger and demands to know what she is doing. Emmeline clutches her throbbing ankle, but Damien calls her pathetic and orders her to get up immediately. Terrified of making him angry, she forces herself to stand despite the pain while he impatiently rushes her. A shadow falls over them as a figure steps in to block Damien's path. Bart stands before them with a dark expression, declaring he can no longer overlook the disrespect shown to his lady. Emmeline stares in shock, whispering Bart's name as he confronts the noble. Damien sneers and pulls Emmeline close, asserting that she is his fiancée and a dog has no right to speak. He turns his glare to Emmeline, shouting at her to confirm his authority to the guard. Emmeline trembles, stammering as she tries to find her voice under his intimidation. She collapses to the ground in submission, begging Damien to forgive her retainer's rudeness. Damien smirks triumphantly as Emmeline forces herself to say she is his fiancée and cares for him. She keeps her head bowed to hide her face, unable to look at the devastated knight standing before her. Damien mocks Bart, asking if the lowly dog finally understands his place while Emmeline clutches her arm in misery. Bart looks on with heartbreak as Emmeline mentally apologizes, having made up her mind to sacrifice her feelings to protect him. A solemn vow is made to protect someone at any cost, even if it invites hatred. The woman lowers her gaze, her expression heavy with unsaid burdens and hidden resolve. Seeking to suppress her feelings for Bart, she buries herself in research at the Cresswell family library. Her diligent investigation into the monster rumors confirms that her hunch was correct. She uncovers a critical text revealing that monsters become active in predictable cycles. Realizing the last deadly surge was 15 years ago, she connects the past tragedy to the current unrest. Terror strikes her as she concludes the current movements are a clear sign of another impending surge. Her attempt to warn her father is met with cold indifference as he dismisses her concerns entirely. He belittles her role to merely bearing children for the frontier house and orders her to leave matters to Damien. With a harsh glare, he warns her not to interfere in affairs that do not concern her. Resigned to his stubbornness, she realizes that no matter what she says, he will not listen. Admitting her powerlessness without magic, she apologizes and retreats from the room. Though Marquis Garrett lives too far away for immediate help, she refuses to simply sit by and do nothing. Arriving at the Bonham estate, she clings to a slim hope and decides to consult Damien directly. Damien reacts with confusion and skepticism when she questions him about the monster activity. He scoffs at her concerns, declaring that monster hunting is a job for knights rather than the heir. His indifferent attitude confirms her worst fear that he views the threat as completely irrelevant to him. The mother interrupts sharply, furious that such nonsense is ruining Damien's rare presence at tea. Struggling to stay calm, she is baffled that her urgent warning is being dismissed as mere nonsense. She presses on, reminding them of the devastating loss of life during the surge 15 years ago. Undeterred, she points out that even the Bonham family suffered victims in that past tragedy. Desperate to prevent history from repeating itself, she tries to reason with the visibly agitated woman. Her plea is cut short as the woman slams the table and screams for absolute silence. Furious, the woman insists that the past tragedy was nothing more than an unfortunate accident. Despite the command to stop, she attempts one last time to argue for the necessity of prevention. The tea party is abruptly ended as the mother drags Damien away, disgusted by the mention of the past. Damien is pulled from the room, leaving her calling out helplessly to his retreating mother. Another lady remarks on the blunder as Damien vanishes, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Lady Cameron chides her for being cruel enough to reopen the mother's painful old wound. She reveals the shocking truth that the father's elder brother and his entire family were victims of that surge. The mother had desperately tried to stop them from returning to their lands as the monster attacks intensified. Tragically, they ignored the warnings and were killed by monsters along with their son. It becomes clear that the mother lives with the deep, haunting regret of failing to stop them. Lady Cameron insults her intelligence, pitying the mother for having such a thoughtless future daughter-in-law. Left alone, she wonders if reopening that wound truly warrants such an explosive reaction. Suspicion grows that there might be a hidden reason the mother wants the incident buried. Later that night, she sits at her desk when a voice suddenly calls out to her. Bart approaches her quietly, asking if she has a moment to spare. He apologizes for the intrusion, noting how long it has been since they spoke alone. He delivers the shocking news that as of today, he has been dismissed from his duty as her guard. Bart drops a bombshell declaration, announcing that as of today he has been dismissed from his position as her guard. Emmeline freezes in sheer disbelief, her mind struggling to process the sudden termination of their bond. He reveals his plan to head straight for the frontier to join the dangerous monster subjugation squad. Emmeline desperately asks why he would do this so suddenly, while Bart admits he has been considering it for a long time. Internalizing his frustration, Bart clenches his fist and laments his own powerlessness. He explains that since he cannot fulfill his basic duty to protect her here, he will go where he can eliminate threats directly. A sad smile touches his lips as he asserts that fighting there is the only thing he is truly capable of doing. Emmeline stares at him in horror, her heart screaming his name as the reality of his departure sinks in. She is terrified by the thought of him fighting monsters, knowing that the battlefield could easily cost him his life. Staring into the mirror, she tells herself that he has done nothing wrong to deserve such a fate. Tears well up in her eyes as she realizes he is being forced away solely because of her own situation. She reaches out a trembling hand into the empty air, silently begging him not to go. Bart stands before her with a pained expression, thinking that he cannot allow himself to drag her down any further. He apologizes for his weakness and assures her again that she has done absolutely nothing wrong. Emmeline denies his self-blame, shaking her head as she insists that his reasoning is not true. Bart looks away, his heart heavy with the unspoken truth that all he ever wanted was to keep her safe. Emmeline realizes this separation is inevitable, but a small hope flickers that it might mean something else. She whispers his name, her voice thick with emotion as she gazes at the man she loves. Bart silently pleads for her not to say the words, terrified that he might lose his resolve. He confesses that he knows there is no future where he can stand proudly by her side. Emmeline covers her mouth to stifle a sob, knowing that if he continues, she will start believing in a hopeless dream. Bart kneels and kisses her hand in a gesture of eternal fealty, vowing that his loyalty will belong to her forever. He stands and turns away, bidding his lady a final, heartbreaking farewell. Emmeline reaches out desperately as his figure retreats down the long, empty hallway. She stands alone in the corridor, tears streaming down her face as she cries out his name one last time. Days later, Emmeline sits in her room, unable to stop thinking about Bart and the void he left behind. She decides she cannot waste time at tea parties and demands to go to the Marquis's house immediately. Her mind races with the information she learned from Alma, unable to shake the new possibility it presents. Alma reassures her that Bart will be fine because he can use magic, meaning he won't go down easily. Emmeline corrects her, stating that she thought his magic wasn't particularly strong, which surprises the maid. Alma reveals that Bart hides his true power to avoid trouble and that his magic is actually very potent. She leans in to whisper a secret, suggesting that it is very likely Bart possesses noble blood. Alma explains that while their mother was a commoner, Bart has a different father who might have been a noble. Emmeline realizes that if he has noble lineage, his exceptionally strong magic makes perfect sense. Her heart races with a dangerous hope as she considers the implications of Bart being a noble. She allows herself a fleeting fantasy where they stand together at the altar, acknowledged as equal partners. The fantasy shatters as Damien's image appears, reminding her that Bart could never surpass a count's son. Frustration gnaws at her, but she resigns herself to the single wish that he simply returns alive. She recalls Bart's willingness to risk his life for her and vows to do anything she can for him in return. Emmeline's eyes blaze with determination, deciding she will no longer endure silently if she wants to protect him. The Bonham estate bustles with activity as Emmeline navigates the crowded hall, the weight of her resolve heavy on her shoulders. Damien approaches with a smug smile, offering Emmeline his sarcastic congratulations on her solitary appearance. He sneers that the dog, who constantly clung to her side, has finally disappeared from the picture. Holding his drink, he assumes she must be feeling relieved now that she is unburdened by her loyal guard. Emmeline realizes with a start that Damien already knows Bart departed for the dangerous frontier. He callously predicts Bart will die a useless death, his corpse serving merely as a shield to protect the nobility. Trembling with suppressed rage, she clenches her fist and demands to know if he understands why Bart volunteered. She confronts him directly, demanding to know why he wastes his magic and strength in comfort while others fight. Damien stares back in sheer disbelief, genuinely confused by her sudden defiance and line of questioning. Ignoring his irritation, she insists that the future Marquis should be the first to rush to the frontier's defense. He scoffs with absolute indifference, declaring he does not care what happens in the countryside. He coldly asserts that peasant deaths are irrelevant and that using them as monster fodder actually benefits the nobility. Emmeline falls silent, absorbing the true depth of his depravity with a quiet, chilling realization. She admits to herself that a part of her had foolishly hoped he possessed even a shred of conscience. She realizes with finality that he does not even consider the people of the frontier to be human. Seemingly bored by her silence, Damien casually asks if she has finished speaking her mind. Emmeline stands her ground and demands an immediate apology for his insults toward Bart and the frontier people. Damien reacts with an incredulous scoff, unable to believe her audacity in demanding contrition from him. He roughly grabs her chin, remarking on her newfound boldness, and offers to forgive her only if she apologizes first. Leaning in dangerously close, he mocks her by asking if she truly believes she is in any position to lecture him. Emmeline violently slaps his hand away, rejecting his touch and his authority with a sharp crack. She furiously questions if a noble possessing nothing but a title is truly worth more than the commoners defending the frontier. Damien stands frozen in shock, his composure shattering as the wine glass slips from his grip. Recovering his voice, he screams in outrage that she would dare to talk back to him. The crowd shrieks in panic as the glass shatters against the floor, drawing every eye in the room to the commotion. Her earring clatters to the floor, but Emmeline remains unmoved, her gaze fixed and burning with resolve. Terrified by the intensity of her glare, Damien stammers as she drops her necklace, declaring it her final answer. She delivers the final blow, telling him to his face that he is utterly unworthy of becoming the Marquis of the Frontier. Emmeline's quiet fury finally erupts as she declares Damien unworthy of becoming the Marquis of the Frontier. Damien is stunned by her defiance, demanding to know how far she intends to humiliate him with this behavior. She boldly announces that this time she will annul their engagement for good, despite his claims of insolence. Damien grabs her arm in a rough grip, shouting that her behavior is unbelievable. He warns her not to get cocky, confused by what has suddenly gotten into her. Screaming with rage, he claims a useless woman like her should be grateful he agreed to marry her. Emmeline stares at him coldly, realizing he is a fool who will never understand her true feelings. She clutches her dress, admitting she once thought she had no choice but to endure his insults. With a calm gaze, she tells him directly that she is not worthy of him. Damien is baffled as she apologizes for foolishly depending on him to protect the frontier all this time. She takes a breath, stating, therefore, as she prepares to deliver her final verdict. Admitting she was wrong to cling to him, she formally accepts his decision to annul the engagement. She smiles with genuine relief, thanking him for everything before turning to leave. Damien is left speechless as she walks away, stammering for her to wait. The onlookers watch the scene unfold with shock and whispered gossip about the annulment. Damien reaches out desperately, shouting for her to stop and listen to him. Sweating nervously, he offers to forgive her if she apologizes right this instant. The crowd turns against him, sneering at how pathetic and disgraceful he is for raising a hand against his fiancée. Damien glares at the whispering nobles, humiliated by their sudden judgment against him. He tries to deflect the blame onto Emmeline, demanding to know why they are looking at him like that when she is at fault. A noblewoman calls him a frightening barbarian and regrets ever keeping his company. Damien stammers in disbelief, desperately reminding everyone that he is the son of a count. Emmeline ignores his screaming commands to return, leaving him raging impotently in the hallway. She walks forward with her head held high, vowing to keep living with no regrets. A strange sensation washes over her, making her feel stronger than before as she walks. She wonders if this new strength comes from her decision to finally stop enduring the mistreatment. Looking at her extravagant dress, she realizes she no longer needs to wear the things her father forced upon her. She reaches up and unclasps the heavy earrings she was always told to wear. Glowing butterflies suddenly materialize around her, causing her to gasp in surprise. She realizes these are spirits, which should only be visible to those who possess magic. Memories flood back of seeing spirits when her mother was still alive, leaving her wondering how she ever forgot. She recalls her mother taking her to the garden to play with the spirits together. The realization hits her with full force as the blocked memories return to her mind. She accepts the truth that she definitely possessed magic power when she was a child. Confusion sets in as she wonders why she lost her power completely and forgot her own childhood. Her gaze falls on the earrings her father gave her while she was grieving her mother's death. She remembers him calling them protective charms that would keep her safe in her mother's place. He had ordered her never to take them off, and she believed they were proof of his hidden love. She stares at the earrings in her hand, realizing the truth revealed the moment she removed them. Her magic has returned, and she steels herself to confirm the suspicion forming in her mind. Emmeline marches into her father's study, interrupting his dismissal with a firm declaration that they need to speak immediately. She reveals the shocking news that Lord Damien has broken their engagement, her face still bearing the physical evidence of the confrontation. Her father's composure shatters instantly, his eyes widening in disbelief as he stammers out a confused demand for clarity. Demanding to know what happened, his focus snaps to her missing earrings as he realizes she is finally looking him in the eye. Emmeline challenges him to explain the true nature of the jewelry, silencing his stammering attempt to feign ignorance. She holds up the earring with a cold stare, exposing the lie that they were ever mere protective charms. She reveals that removing the ornaments instantly restored her sight of spirits, proving they were designed to suppress her magic and memories. Confronting him with the truth, she accuses him of orchestrating the deception to strip her of her magical identity. Furious, he slams his fist onto the desk and screams about the suffering her magic has caused him. He launches into a tirade, insisting that a woman's only path to happiness lies in serving a husband and bearing children. He finally admits the root of his fear, confessing that her magic was far too powerful to be left unchecked. He argues that while she was the rightful heir to the market and its dangerous duties, he suppressed her power to force a safer life upon her. With a self-righteous glare, he claims that stripping away her destiny was an act of paternal protection done solely for her sake. Emmeline repeats his justification with hollow disbelief, questioning the validity of a protection that required such deceit. She counters his claim of love by reminding him of his cold neglect, asking how a loving father could treat his child as invisible. She recalls the years of scorn and ridicule she endured daily, all because the seal on her magic made her appear incompetent. Even in her isolation, she notes with bitterness that he never once offered the support that Bart and Alma freely gave. Ignoring her pain, he coldly commands her to return to Damien and beg for forgiveness to salvage the engagement. Rejection hardens in her eyes as she clutches her chest, realizing that his controlling manipulation is nothing close to love. She acknowledges his misguided perspective but stands firm, declaring that from now on, she alone will define her happiness. Summoning a glowing spirit butterfly, she announces her resolve to head to the market and fight monsters with her restored magic. With a fierce smile, she defines her own destiny, embracing the dangerous path as her true source of happiness. Defeated by her stubbornness, he screams at her to do as she pleases, comparing her to her mother as she quietly thanks him. Stepping forward with newfound purpose, she leaves the past behind and embraces the path she has chosen. Emmeline clicks her tongue in frustration, annoyed that her attack missed the target completely. She steels her resolve, telling herself to focus and try the spell one more time. Looking at her earrings, she reflects that her true magic has finally returned ever since she removed them. She swears to use this regained power to protect the frontier from the threat of monsters. Concentrating her energy, she unleashes a spell to conjure sharp blades of wind. She commands the wind to cut down the targets standing before her. The magical blades slice through the air, striking the wooden targets with precision. Emmeline beams with excitement, cheering that she actually managed to hit the target. She breathes a sigh of relief, feeling that she is finally starting to get the hang of controlling her magic. She prepares to leave for the frontier, admitting she is nervous but determined not to remain sheltered forever. Alma informs her that the carriage is ready for their departure. Emmeline turns to her maid, thanking Alma sincerely for choosing to come with her. Alma smiles gently, assuring her lady that she could never let her go alone. Emmeline feels a pang of guilt for dragging her into a place overrun with monsters, but feels glad she is there. Alma insists she is happy just to stay by Emmeline's side, asking her not to apologize. She affirms that her lady's happiness is her own happiness as well. Alma holds her hand, asking to share in her worries even if just a little. Tears well up in Emmeline's eyes as she expresses how truly grateful she is for Alma's presence. Emmeline explains that her father refused her request for guards, leaving only Alma and the coachman to accompany her. She realizes that to her father, She is nothing more than a worthless daughter and a burden. Despite the rejection, she hardens her heart and decides she cannot let that stop her. She understands that on this journey, the only thing she can rely on to reach the market safely is her own magic. Her mind fills with the image of fighting beside Bart to protect everyone at the frontier. A longing thought crosses her mind, wishing that the three of them could laugh together again someday. Seated in the carriage, she bids a silent goodbye to House Cresswell. As the estate fades into the distance, she declares that place is no longer her home. Alma watches her, noting how glad she is to see her lady smiling like this. From a high window, her father watches the carriage leave, muttering that it is infuriating she caused this mess. The carriage rolls out of the city gates, marking the beginning of their long journey. That evening in an inn, Alma brings food while Emmeline rests from the travel. The journey continues for days as Emmeline practices her magic from the moving carriage. Birds fly overhead in a vast sky, symbolizing the freedom she is traveling toward. Emmeline tells Alma that the wondrous sights are enough to keep her going despite the fatigue of travel. The coachman calls out to them, announcing that they have finally arrived at their destination. A sprawling landscape unfolds before them, revealing the territory of the market. Emmeline looks out the window in awe, thinking that the frontier is more beautiful than she imagined. However, she notices the road is eerily empty of people and feels a sudden, bad premonition. Suddenly, the carriage lurches violently, causing Emmeline and Alma to scream as they are thrown off balance. Alma points out the window in terror, shouting for her lady to look at what has appeared. Emmeline freezes in horror as a massive threat blocks their path, confirming her worst fears. Emmeline freezes in horror as screams erupt, announcing the impossible presence of monsters in a populated area. Chaos erupts as a carriage driver cries for help, trapped by the beast while Emmeline realizes she cannot leave him to die. Stepping out of the carriage with trembling resolve, she silences her fear and declares that she must fight. The sheer size of the beast looms over her, shrinking her confidence as she realizes a single pounce spells certain death. Her hands shake as she questions if she truly possesses the power to defeat such a terrifying monstrosity. Shaking off the doubt, she steels her gaze and focuses her mind, deciding that victory is the only option regardless of the odds. She calls out to the spirits with desperation, gathering glowing particles of light to fuel her magical strike. A blinding flash erupts as she unleashes her power just as the horned wolf lunges to tear her apart. The spell collides violently with the beast, blasting it back with a force that shakes the very ground. Emmeline stares in breathless disbelief at the fallen creature, realizing she actually succeeded in striking it down. Alma cheers for her victory, but the celebration is cut short as she screams a warning about the threat directly behind them. A fresh pack of horned wolves emerges from the shadows, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. Emmeline whirls around in panic, her heart sinking as she realizes the first monster was merely the vanguard. Alma begs her mistress to run from the overwhelming numbers, but Emmeline hesitates, knowing retreat means death for the others. Refusing to flee, she unleashes a volley of wind blades, determined to stop the slaughter before it begins. The sharp gusts slice through the air, aim to cut the beasts down in a single sweeping motion. To her horror, the lead wolf nimbly dodges the attack and leaps high into the air, closing the distance in a flash. The beast snaps its jaws inches from her face, but a sudden, crackling energy deflects the lethal bite mid-strike. Emmeline flinches, confused by the lack of pain and the sudden flash of light that shielded her. She opens her eyes to find a shimmering barrier standing between her and the monster, protecting her completely. Stunned, she looks around frantically, trying to identify the source of the powerful magic that saved her life. Her gaze lands on a solitary figure walking away into the forest, his back turned to the scene of the battle. Recognition dawns on her face, her eyes widening as the familiar silhouette strikes a chord in her memory. She whispers in disbelief, unable to comprehend that the person walking away is the very one she thought was gone. Emmeline gasps in disbelief as a familiar silhouette emerges from the remains of the sliced monster, and she whispers that it cannot be true. She stares in shock at the knight standing before her, realizing with a jolt that it is truly him. Her voice trembles as she whispers Bart's name, her eyes widening with recognition. Bart looks back in equal astonishment, unable to fathom how his lady could possibly be here at the dangerous frontier. A sudden realization sharpens his gaze as he senses a new threat approaching from the shadows. He screams for her to watch out, throwing himself between her and a lunging beast. Bart commands her to stand back, drawing his weapon as another monster emerges from the forest. With a fierce cry, he intercepts the beast, his blade clashing against its massive claws. The monster snaps its jaws, but Bart moves with lightning speed to dodge the lethal strike. He counters with a powerful swing, driving his sword deep into the creature's flank. Emmeline watches in awe, whispering that his strength is truly incredible. Bart stands over the defeated foe, and Emmeline notes that he has become even stronger than she remembers. He sighs with relief and immediately turns to her, frantically asking if she is hurt anywhere. His expression hardens as he begs her to return to the capital, insisting she must be somewhere safe before her wedding. Emmeline clutches her dress tightly, gathering the courage to reveal the truth she has been holding back. She closes her eyes and announces clearly that her engagement has been formally called off. Bart is stunned as she declares her decision to protect the frontier herself, refusing to leave. He stares at her with intense emotion, admitting that he wanted to see her again no matter what. Emmeline steps closer, realizing she must speak the words she never got to say when he left the estate. She confesses that she traveled all this way because she was ready to do anything just to see him one more time. Blushing deeply, she vows that no matter what happens, she wants to be with him. They gaze into each other's eyes, the air between them charged with their unspoken feelings. Emmeline tells him that her happiness exists only when she is by his side. A shadow crosses Bart's face as he struggles with his own insecurities. He looks away, stating quietly that she is mistaken about that assumption. Bart lowers his head, insisting that he is not the kind of man who deserves a woman like her. He claims a man of low birth could never make her happy, but Emmeline vehemently denies his self-deprecation. Bart argues that her status is too high, but she counters that status doesn't matter when he just saved her life. He pleads with her to return to the capital, convinced she will one day find someone far more suitable than him. Emmeline is terrified, thinking that if he turns her away now after she came all this way, she will be lost. Tears well in her eyes as she whispers that if he refuses her, there is nothing left for her to do. Alma suddenly interrupts the tense moment, stepping forward to catch their attention. Bart stares in confusion at the maid, slowly realizing that his sister is standing right there. Alma scolds him harshly, calling him a pathetic boy for making her lady travel this far only to be rejected. She tells him to stop whining about status and instead prove his worth through his own strength. Alma commands him to rise in rank and earn his place, warning that otherwise he will never be able to protect Emmeline. Bart smiles ruefully, admitting he can't win against his sister and realizing he wasn't determined enough. He turns back to Emmeline and extends his hand, calling out to his lady with renewed resolve. He admits he is not yet worthy of returning her feelings, but asks her to wait for him. Bart vows that one day he will become the kind of man who can stand beside her proudly. A gentle hand squeezes hers, offering a silent vow of support and connection in the quiet moment. Emmeline smiles with genuine warmth, her heart settling as she accepts the unspoken promise between them. She vows to wait until she is strong enough to protect him in return, promising to work just as hard. Bart gazes at her with deep affection and gratitude, softly thanking her for her resolve and trust. Inspired by his dedication, she silently swears to match his determination and push forward without fear. With her mind made up, she asks Bart to take her to the manor so she can greet the Marquis before sunset. As they prepare to head to the market, she nervously realizes it has been 10 years since she last saw her grandfather. The carriage arrives at the imposing estate, leaving her wondering if the master of the house will welcome her kindly. Stepping into the grand hall, she feels a wave of nostalgia, recalling that she had visited this massive mansion when her mother was alive. A gasp interrupts her thoughts as the head maid stares in shock, instantly recognizing the resemblance to her mother. Hannah, the head maid who served her years ago, rushes forward to embrace her with tearful relief and a warm welcome. Emmeline smiles softly at the display of affection, thanking the loyal woman for her kind words. The maid wipes her tears, overwhelmed with happiness to see that her lady has returned safely to where she belongs. Turning to Bart, Emmeline confirms his appointment as a knight there while the maid hurries off to inform the master. While they wait, Bart describes the Marquis as kind but wild, leaving Emmeline confused and anxious about what to expect. A booming voice apologizes for the wait as a large, imposing figure clad in armor strides into the room. The Marquis greets Emmeline with boisterous energy, remarking on how long it has been since they last met. Seeing Marquis Zachary Garrett in person, Emmeline internally agrees that wild is indeed the perfect description for her grandfather. The reunion turns serious as she reveals the broken engagement and the fact that Damien struck her. Zachary explodes with rage, swearing to storm the Capitol and crush Damien himself for daring to hurt her. He continues to shout in fury while the maids agree with his sentiment but try to restrain his violent impulse. Alma and Hannah desperately try to calm the raging Marquis, pointing out that his outburst is terrifying Emmeline. Regaining some composure, Zachary turns his sharp gaze to Bart, demanding to know where he was during the incident. The tension in the room spikes as he coldly accuses Bart of failing his sworn duty to protect her. Bart lowers his head in shame, offering no excuses as he admits his failure and apologizes. Emmeline immediately steps in to defend him, insisting that Bart did absolutely everything he could to keep her safe. She explains with conviction that without his support, she would have lost all hope long before reaching the frontier. The Marquis listens intently, his anger fading as he processes the depth of loyalty Bart has shown her. He realizes he was too distracted by his duties to notice the seal on her magic or her suffering, and he turns to thank her protectors. Expressing deep regret for his ignorance regarding her engagement and magic, he acknowledges the debt he owes to Bart and Alma. To everyone's shock, the proud Marquis bows his head low, offering a sincere and humble apology to his granddaughter. Emmeline is deeply moved by his humility and quickly asks him to raise his head, assuring him that his words are enough. Zachary declares that from this moment on, the entire household will stand united to support and protect her. He promises her absolute support, telling her that she only needs to say the word if she ever needs anything. Tears well up in Emmeline's eyes as she thanks him, feeling the weight of her loneliness finally dissolve. A profound sense of relief washes over her as she realizes she is truly no longer fighting her battles alone. Surrounded by her newfound family and allies, she feels a surge of strength knowing she doesn't have to face the future by herself. The heartwarming moment is shattered when a knight bursts through the doors, shouting urgently for the Marquis. The messenger delivers the terrifying news that a powerful monster has breached their lands and is attacking. Emmeline's expression shifts from peace to shock, the reality of the frontier's danger crashing back into her life. News breaks that a powerful monster has breached the frontier, causing immediate alarm among the group gathered in the hall. Emmeline volunteers to join the fight, but the men immediately shut her down and rush to gather the soldiers instead. She hesitates as she watches them, fearing that her presence would only slow everyone down since she barely took down one monster before. She imagines herself lying defeated on the battlefield, convinced that she would only get in the way instead of helping the squad. Her grandfather orders the guards to remain at the manor specifically to protect Emmeline while they are gone. Bart and the Marquis rush out the door, leaving Emmeline behind as she tries in vain to call out to them. Emmeline stands alone in the silence, clutching her brooch with a look of helpless frustration. The estate stands quiet and imposing under the night sky as the battle rages elsewhere. She paces anxiously, tormented by the knowledge that grandfather and Bart are risking their lives while she stays safe. She stares out the window into the darkness, bitterly calling herself a coward for staying behind. Doubts consume her as she questions if someone as fearful as she is can truly inherit the Marquis. Alma enters the room and urges her lady to rest, offering to keep watch in her stead. Emmeline smiles sadly but refuses, insisting she will stay awake until the men return safely. Alma tries to protest, but Emmeline gently cuts her off and tells the maid to go rest instead. She turns back to the empty room, stating that waiting is the very least she can do. Time passes slowly as the chandelier glitters above the silent, tense vigil. Emmeline leans against the balcony railing, her gaze fixed intently on the entrance below. Suddenly her eyes widen as she spots movement in the distance. She rushes down the stairs in a panic, shouting for her grandfather and Bart. The men enter the hall looking battered and exhausted, with Bart calling out to his lady immediately. Emmeline is horrified by their bleeding wounds, but her grandfather dismisses his own injuries and orders a healer for the others. She freezes at the sight of the soldiers lying on the floor, groaning in pain from their severe injuries. Terror fills her eyes as the brutal reality of the frontier's defense lies bleeding before her. The Marquis explains grimly that they couldn't protect everyone, and those without magic took the attacks head-on. He praises the soldiers for fighting without fear, while knights tend to their fallen comrades in the background. Emmeline trembles, struck by the irony that she possesses magic yet did absolutely nothing. She realizes she could have helped save them if she hadn't been paralyzed by her own fear. Her hand clenches into a fist as she steels her resolve and calls out to her grandfather. Looking him in the eye, she begs him to listen to her request. She demands firmly that he make her his official successor. The Marquis asks if she is serious, reminding her that she has now seen exactly how dangerous it is to defend this land. Bart steps in to agree, arguing that the burden is too heavy and they cannot risk her safety. Emmeline ignores the protest and tightly grasps her hands together. She unleashes her magic, filling the room with glowing light and butterflies to prove her point. The Marquis is stunned by the display, recognizing the warmth and strength of her magic power. Emmeline admits she was afraid her power wasn't enough, but declares she can no longer afford to remain in fear. She vows that if her strength can save even one person, she is ready to face any danger that comes. With determination in her eyes, she pleads with her grandfather once more. She asks to help protect this land as a true descendant of the Garrett Marquis. The Marquis looks at his granddaughter in silence, his expression shifting as he processes her resolve. Marquis Zachary places a warm hand on her head, praising her resolve and proudly acknowledging her as his true granddaughter. Turning to the anxious knight, Zachary assures Bart that he trusts Emmeline's capabilities after witnessing her magic firsthand. He turns his gaze to Emmeline, advising her to have faith in her master and to stand firmly by his side. Emmeline accepts the command with a sharp, "Yes, sir," as Zachary reveals he needs her immediate assistance. Leading them forward, he points ominously to a magical disturbance visible in the distance. Emmeline gasps in shock as she sees the complex magical barrier fracturing and collapsing right before her eyes. Zachary explains that monsters have weakened the defense and asks her to lend her magic to reinforce it before it shatters. Seeing the determination in her eyes, he smiles with satisfaction as she readily agrees to the dangerous task. He orders the team to move out, commanding Emmeline and Bart to stay glued to his side at all times. Marching with purpose, Emmeline vows to prove her worth and swears she will never repeat the mistakes of her past. Bart encourages her to unleash her power without fear, solemnly promising to protect her with his life. She meets his gaze with a fierce smile, thanking him but firmly declaring she will not let him die for her. Steeling her resolve, she tells herself that with Bart by her side, they can overcome whatever lies ahead. The group arrives at a solemn, ancient gate, marking the entrance to a place heavy with history and silence. They step into the grounds, walking past rows of silent tombstones that line the path to the ritual site. Zachary reveals that this is the Garrett family burial ground, a sacred place teeming with wandering spirits. He explains that their ancestors chose to rest here to stand eternal guard against the powerful monsters that haunt the area. Gesturing to the central statue, he reveals the critical secret that the protective barrier originates from this very spot. As they prepare to begin, Emmeline realizes the overwhelming number of spirits is due to the ancestors' lingering presence. Zachary instructs her to follow his lead and channel her magic directly into the earth to stabilize the foundation. Emmeline drops to her knees and touches the ground, banishing all fear as she pours her entire soul into the spell. A blinding light erupts from the earth as her magic floods the ley lines, beginning to stitch the barrier back together. Zachary cheers as the cracks begin to seal, urging her to maintain the flow and push the healing even further. Gritting her teeth against the strain, Emmeline digs deep into her reserves, realizing she needs even more power to finish the job. Suddenly, Zachary stumbles and coughs violently, shocking Emmeline as his body betrays him at the critical moment. She realizes with horror that his mana is nearly depleted, but he stubbornly commands her to ignore him and keep going. His legs give out completely and he collapses to the ground, leaving Emmeline screaming in terror as their leader falls. Bart yanks her back just in time, shouting a warning as the ground beneath them erupts with terrifying force. A colossal, dark monstrosity bursts forth from the earth, towering over them and casting a shadow of absolute doom. Emmeline stares in horror at the massive limb descending from the sky, gasping as she questions the nature of the beast. A colossal dragon foot crashes down onto the earth, shaking the ground with a terrifying impact that sends debris flying. The Marquis pales as he identifies the threat, realizing with dread that a legendary black dragon has appeared. Emmeline freezes in disbelief, whispering that such a nightmare scenario cannot possibly be happening. Demonic birds shatter the magical dome overhead, signaling that the barrier has completely collapsed under the dragon's blow. Chaos erupts as mages scream for everyone to prepare themselves against the incoming horde of monsters. The Marquis grabs Emmeline's shoulder urgently, commanding her to listen to his instructions carefully. He orders her to restore the barrier immediately while he and the soldiers hold off the enemy advance. Emmeline's eyes widen in fear as she asks if he really means for her to handle such a monumental task alone. The Marquis admits his own mana is depleted but assures her he has a final trump card to drive off the dragon. He reveals that the family burial ground allows him to summon the ancestors' divine protection for one last burst of power. Emmeline realizes with horror that this final resort will likely cost him his life and asks if he would go that far. Placing a hand on her head, he reminds her of her bloodline and tells her to focus solely on the barrier. Emmeline looks at his determined face, her voice trembling as she acknowledges his strength. He turns to face the battlefield, leaving her with the heavy words that he is counting on her. Tears well up in her eyes, but she fiercely wipes them away to steel herself for the task. Her expression hardens into one of resolve as she accepts the duty entrusted to her. The Marquis smiles at her growth before stepping forward onto the cracked earth to meet his fate. He draws his sword and faces the dragon, declaring he will defend his land with the pride of House Garrett. Emmeline clasps her hands in desperate prayer, begging for him to return to her safely. She pivots and sprints toward her position, her footsteps heavy with determination. Running past Bart, she declares she will repair the barrier as fast as possible while he acknowledges her command. Bart's eyes sharpen with intense focus as he scans the battlefield for threats. He vows to slaughter any monster that gets close to her, urging his lady to stay focused on her magic. Emmeline places her hands on the ground, swearing to herself that she will not let her grandfather die. She pours her energy into the spell, knowing she must restore the barrier immediately for his sake. Sweat runs down her face as she strains to weave the magic, pleading for the spell to work. The magic shatters like glass, and she cries out in despair as her mana proves too weak to hold the barrier. She slams her hand against the ground in frustration, refusing to give up despite the failure. A scream pierces the air nearby, and she watches in horror as a defender collapses from their wounds. Her vision blurs as she looks at the blood staining her hand, realizing the situation is deteriorating rapidly. The battlefield descends into a massacre as monsters overwhelm the soldiers while she stands there hesitating. She watches helplessly as knights are struck down, realizing that her hesitation is costing lives. A pack of horned wolves surrounds her, growling as they close in on the vulnerable mage. Emmeline accepts her end, thinking that her power truly wasn't enough to save anyone. Suddenly, a figure dashes in front of her, sword drawn to intercept the fatal strike. Bart unleashes a furious slash, scattering the wolves in a spray of blood to protect his lady. He turns to her with a calm smile, assuring her that everything is going to be all right. Bart encourages her with unwavering faith, telling her that he knows she can do this. Emmeline stares at him in surprise as he holds up a familiar object, asking if she remembers it. Bart reveals a worn handkerchief, and Emmeline gasps as she recognizes the gift she gave him in their childhood. He confesses that he has kept it safe all these years, looking at her clumsy embroidery whenever he needed to remember her effort. Emmeline flushes with embarrassment at the crooked stitching, but the memory of offering it to him remains vivid in her mind. In the past, the maid's cruel whispers pierced her heart, mocking her lack of magic and claiming no one would ever want her. Despite the stinging insults, young Emmeline sat alone in her room, clutching the hoop and struggling to master the needle. Beaming with pride, she ran to show Bart her finished work, declaring it her absolute best despite the late hour. With a shy and hopeful smile, she offered the imperfect cloth to him, asking if he would accept her humble gift. Young Bart didn't hesitate for a moment, his gentle smile washing away her insecurity as he promised to take it. Back in the present, he holds the cloth like a treasure, calling it proof of the resilience she showed against her tormentors. He looks her in the eye and declares that her refusal to give up in that mansion inspired him to never surrender either. United by their shared strength, he vows that they will keep fighting side by side until the very end. Emmeline whispers a heartfelt thanks, her resolve strengthening as she looks at her loyal knight. She internalizes his determination, reaffirming her own vow to keep trying endlessly until she finally succeeds. With a fierce light in her eyes, she tells herself that giving up is simply not an option. Emmeline spots a pattern in the enemy movements, and Bart immediately steps up to clear a path so she can focus. She realizes the monsters are guarding a massive black dragon, and Bart formulates a risky plan to draw its attention away. Smirking with confident bravado, he volunteers to make himself the decoy to break the enemy's formation. He flashes his lucky handkerchief to reassure her, urging her to focus solely on the barrier while he faces the beast. A massive shadow strikes with blinding speed, cutting through the air with lethal intent. Bart shoves Emmeline aside in a desperate lunge, placing his own body directly in the path of the attack. The blow connects, leaving him paralyzed on the ground and wondering if this is truly the end. Bloodied but defiant, the Marquis calls upon the ancestors' blessing, refusing to let his children fall to the beast. He screams for Bart to stand as the colossal black dragon looms over them, jaws gaping wide to devour them. A massive claw descends with crushing force, aiming to obliterate the fallen knight in a single strike. The dragon lunges with a terrifying roar, closing the distance to Bart, who lies helpless on the ground. Emmeline watches in paralyzed horror as the beast strikes, her scream tearing through the chaos. The monster prepares the finishing blow, and Bart lies motionless as death approaches in a flash of scales. Desperation explodes from Emmeline as she screams for the creature to stop with every ounce of her being. A cataclysmic burst of light erupts from her, blasting the monster's back and flooding the ruins with overwhelming power. A blinding light erupts from Emmeline's position, shocking the Marquis as the battlefield is bathed in sudden brilliance. Emmeline is bewildered by the source of the glow, realizing with confusion that it is pulsating from her own pocket. She pulls out the object and gasps, instantly recognizing the earrings she used to wear back at the estate. The earrings float from her hands, intensifying in brightness as a massive surge of energy builds up around them. Pure magic overflows into her body, a sensation of limitless power coursing through her veins like never before. Gritting her teeth, she realizes that with this overwhelming power, she can finally achieve the impossible task. She slams her hands down, pleading for success as she channels every ounce of energy into the spell. Emmeline screams for the barrier to return to its full strength, unleashing a massive shockwave of light. The shattered sky begins to mend as the magical dome reconstructs itself with blinding speed. A massive wave of light sweeps across the land, repairing the defenses and pushing back the darkness. The Marquis and Emmeline watch in awe as the massive rift in the sky is sealed shut by the restoration. As the light fades, the earrings shatter into dust, their purpose finally fulfilled with a quiet sound. The soldiers look around in stunned silence as the terrifying horde of monsters begins to disintegrate before their eyes. Emmeline collapses to her knees, her legs giving out now that the adrenaline has faded and the deed is done. Tears of relief fill her eyes as she clasps her hands, grateful that she finally succeeded in restoring the barrier. Bart rushes to her side in a panic, checking her for injuries while frantically shouting her name. He looks out at the battlefield, stunned to see the black dragon and its army turning to ash. Realization hits him that the blinding light earlier was Emmeline's doing, and he asks in shock what on earth happened. The Marquis approaches them, completely healed, and asks if Emmeline is injured anywhere. He notes with astonishment that his own severe wounds have vanished without a trace. The barrier's light not only purged the monsters but also miraculously healed every wounded soldier on the field. The Marquis praises Emmeline, admitting he has never seen such a powerful barrier in all his life. Emmeline shakes her head humbly, explaining that this strength did not truly belong to her. She reveals the source was the earrings her father gave her, which she thought were just to seal her magic. The Marquis realizes the truth, noting that they were far more than simple sealing charms. He explains that the stones were vessels designed to absorb and store her magical energy over time. Years of accumulated power were released all at once to create that miracle, leaving nothing behind. Emmeline is puzzled, recalling that she had definitely left the earrings behind at the manor before leaving. She suspects the spirits were responsible, and the Marquis agrees that the little ones likely intervened. She imagines the spirits sneaking the earrings into her pocket, wanting to ensure she was protected. A spirit butterfly flutters past as she whispers an acknowledgement of their silent help. She smiles gently at the spirit, thanking them for always watching over her even when she couldn't see. Emmeline reflects that her magic was being stored safely all those years she felt alone and powerless. She turns to Bart, declaring with a smile that her miserable life at the Cresswell estate wasn't in vain. She realizes that all those silent, lonely days were actually a preparation for this very moment. Her eyes shine with resolve as she says it was all so she could protect everyone here today. Bart places a hand over his heart, swearing a solemn oath never to let her suffer again. He kneels before her, vowing to dedicate his entire life to protecting her from this day forth. Emmeline blushes and thanks him softly, touched by his unwavering devotion. The Marquis watches the pair with a knowing look, seeing the deep bond that has formed between them. Emmeline heads to the manor with her grandfather, ready to announce their hard-won victory to the household. The soldiers erupt in cheers as she returns, praising her for the miracle of restoring the barrier. Emmeline is overcome with emotion, realizing that she has truly succeeded in protecting the land and its people. A newfound confidence swells within her as she recognizes her power to make a real difference. Days later she is back on the battlefield, unleashing her magic to drive back a pack of vicious wolves. The soldiers celebrate as the monsters on their flank are successfully cleared out. Grandfather warns that they must be thorough, as even a single escaped monster poses a danger. He frets over a scratch on her hand, but she insists on helping to save her healing magic for the soldiers. Grasping his hand, she insists on helping, admitting that their support gives her the confidence to fight. The soldiers watch in awe as she heals them, touched by her immense power and gentle kindness. They whisper among themselves, admiring how she never hesitates to use her magic for common soldiers. Reverence fills their voices as they bestow upon her the title of the Saint of Garrett. Grandfather teases her about her new nickname while the men rally to give their all for their saint. He beams with pride, declaring that he can finally rest easy knowing the title of Marquis will pass to her. He teases that he hasn't grown old yet, declaring his next duty is to find her a suitable husband. Emmeline flushes at the mention of marriage, but the moment is cut short by a report of a new monster wave. Her gaze drifts to Bart as she silently admits there is only one person she truly desires. Bart notices her staring and asks if something is wrong, causing her to quickly look away in embarrassment. He smiles warmly and follows her lead, reaffirming his dedication as they head back into the fray. Emmeline shakes off her romantic thoughts, deciding that the battlefield is no place for such distractions. The battle ends and night falls over the estate, casting a peaceful silence over the manor. Alma welcomes them back with a warm smile, praising Emmeline for her great efforts. Emmeline humbly deflects the praise to Bart, explaining that his diversionary tactics allow her to focus on magic. Bart smiles gently, expressing his deep satisfaction in finding a true purpose by her side. Emmeline's heart skips a beat as she struggles to voice the feelings swelling in her chest. She looks at him with longing, wondering if he sees her as anything more than just his master. Pushing down her uncertainty, she smiles and tells him she will be counting on him from now on. Bart bows faithfully, promising to always be there for her without a moment's hesitation. Later in her room, she lets out a heavy sigh, the weight of her unrequited feelings pressing down on her. She laments to herself, terrified that their relationship is destined to remain strictly professional. Her gloomy thoughts are interrupted as Alma gently calls out to her. The maid enters with a comforting cup of her favorite herbal tea to soothe her spirits. Emmeline accepts the cup with a grateful smile, the rich aroma helping to calm her racing mind. They gaze out the window together, admiring the brilliance of the stars in the clear night sky. Emmeline decides there is no need to rush, content to bask in what feels like the happiest time of her life. Society in the royal capital buzzes with malicious gossip, mocking Damien for striking his fiancée and getting dumped. Damien seethes in humiliated rage, cursing Emmeline's name and vowing revenge for his ruined reputation. Gossip spreads like wildfire through the royal capital as nobles whisper in disbelief about the so-called incompetent Lady Emmeline. Rumors run wild that she fought alongside the Marquis and single-handedly restored the broken barrier against the monster horde. Public opinion flips instantly as she is hailed as the Saint of Garrett, while a certain noble seethes with jealousy at the news. At House Cresswell, Damien grinds his teeth in fury, remembering how people sneered at him just the other day. He shouts in disbelief, refusing to accept the report that Emmeline actually possesses powerful magic. Turning on his father, he blames Emmeline for dragging his reputation into the gutter and accuses the Count of praising her too. His father warns him to calm down, terrified that their behavior might cause the Marquis of Garrett to cut ties with them completely. The Count suggests they join forces to handle the situation, blaming Emmeline for putting them in this precarious position. Meanwhile at the frontier, Bart and the maids surprise Emmeline with a warm, happy birthday greeting. Emmeline gasps in pure delight, her eyes widening as she takes in the festive scene before her. Bart stands with a gentle smile, offering his heartfelt congratulations to his lady. Musicians play lively tunes while a lavish feast awaits on the table, setting a joyous atmosphere. The room sparkles with decorations and delicious food, prepared with love for the special occasion. Emmeline clutches her chest in confusion, asking what all this is for as the maids explain they wanted to celebrate together. The cook smiles warmly, telling her that they did this simply because everyone loves her dearly. Tears well up in Emmeline's eyes as the sincerity of their affection touches her heart deeply. She recalls her past at House Cresswell, admitting to herself that she used to hate birthdays. Back then, no one in her family cared, and she relied solely on Bart and Alma for any celebration. She remembers walking the cold halls, feeling every ounce of her father and stepmother's indifference. Snapping back to the present, she thanks her new family, realizing how different and warm her life is now. With a beaming smile, she confesses that she loves them all too, touching everyone's hearts. The knights and maids blush and stammer, overwhelmed by their lady's direct affection. Chaos erupts as everyone clamors for her to say it again, shouting that it's not fair for only some to hear it. The head maid scolds the rowdy bunch, but Emmeline laughs and promises to say it as many times as they want. The Marquis arrives amidst the noise, telling the head maid to let them off the hook just this once. Emmeline curtsies and thanks her grandfather, assuring him that the lively party was hardly a hassle. The Marquis looks around with nostalgia, noting that it has been a long time since the manor was this lively. A shadow crosses his face as he admits there haven't been many occasions to celebrate since his wife and children passed. Emmeline looks at him with empathy, acknowledging the truth of his lonely years. She watches him ascend the stairs, realizing that her grandfather must have been incredibly lonely in this huge manor. She reaches out and takes his hand, making a silent but firm promise to stay by his side. The magical butterflies flutter around them, sealing the moment of connection between grandfather and granddaughter. The Marquis smiles, calling himself a lucky man and vowing that she will never feel alone again under his care. He pats her head gently, and Emmeline closes her eyes, thanking him for his kindness. He announces that he has prepared a special gift for her and will bring it to her room later. Emmeline wonders what it could be as she watches him walk towards the door with a mysterious air. Later in her room, the Marquis presents a box, stating he wishes to bestow this special item upon her. He reveals a magnificent dagger resting on a velvet cushion, its handle intricate and ornate. Emmeline stares in awe at the beautiful weapon, asking what it is as her eyes reflect its gleam. The Marquis holds the dagger proudly, explaining that it is a treasured blade passed down in their house. Marquis Zachary presents Emmeline with a ceremonial dagger, solemnly declaring that this heirloom is meant to be carried by the next true heir of the family. Emmeline stares at him in breathless shock, asking if this gift signifies that he officially recognizes her as his successor. He confirms it with a smile, noting that her achievements have reached the capital and that she has clearly earned the adoration of her people. Emmeline is moved to tears as she reflects on the overwhelming support she has received from the soldiers and staff since arriving at the frontier. A gentle smile graces her lips as she accepts the weight of her new responsibility with quiet grace. Gripping the dagger, she silently vows to repay the kindness of her people little by little as their future leader. She promises to cherish the heirloom, and the Marquis nods with satisfaction at her growth and resolve. The mood shifts as Zachary declares that since she is now a full-fledged adult, they must discuss the immediate future. Emmeline freezes in panic as he bluntly states that they must find her a husband, asking if she already has someone in mind. Her mind races back to a cherished memory, recalling a vow to become worthy of her feelings and asking her to wait until then. Doubt creeps in as she wonders if he truly feels the same way, realizing that he never actually stated his feelings clearly. The Marquis interrupts her thoughts by casually suggesting that Bart would be an excellent match for her. Emmeline is left stammering in confusion as Zachary praises Bart's backbone and admits he would welcome the knight as a grandson. Before she can process the revelation, the Marquis abruptly excuses himself and tells her to get some rest. Zachary pauses in the hallway, his expression shifting from grandfatherly warmth to a knowing smirk as he spots the guard. He drops a sly warning to Bart, advising the knight that he and Emmeline are adorably inexperienced but will miss their chance if they keep dawdling. Bart blushes furiously, realizing the Marquis sees right through them, and stands in stunned silence as the old man walks away. Left alone in her room, Emmeline realizes her grandfather has figured everything out and wonders if he truly accepts Bart as her husband. She stares out the window at the glowing lights, telling herself that despite the approval, she needs to be sure of Bart's feelings first. Frustration takes over as she flops onto her bed, kicking her legs and realizing that doing nothing will get her nowhere. Burying her face in her pillow, she resolves to confront Bart tomorrow and ask him directly how he feels. The next day in the hallway, they bump into each other and simultaneously speak up, creating an awkward tension. Bart flushes and asks to speak with her alone, surprising Emmeline, who had intended to ask the exact same thing. They agree to move their conversation to the garden, the air thick with anticipation and nervous energy. Beneath the shade of the trees, they stand in silence, struggling to find the words to bridge the gap between them. Emmeline trembles with nerves, terrified that she might be wrong about his feelings as she asks to speak first. Bart interrupts her trembling with a sudden confession, declaring that he has loved her since the very day they met. Emmeline stares at him in wide-eyed disbelief, her heart pounding as his words sink in. Bart looks away with a pained expression, admitting that he originally came to the frontier to try and give up on her. He confesses that he was resigned to dying in battle, content to slay monsters for her sake if his love could never be returned. He turns to face her, his gaze intense as he points out that her decision to chase after him changed everything. He glances down at the grass, admitting that despite knowing he was far beneath her station, her presence gave him hope. A soft smile touches his lips as he tells her that simply being near her made him happier than he could have imagined. Recalling her bravery in battle, he vows that watching her fight so earnestly made him want to protect her more than anyone else. Bart takes a breath and looks her in the eye, stammering slightly as he asks if he is allowed to ask for more. With absolute conviction, he asks Emmeline to marry him, bridging the gap between knight and master once and for all. Emmeline is overwhelmed with emotion, realizing that Bart has saved her in more ways than she can count. Tears stream down her face as she realizes this is the moment she had always dreamed of but never dared to expect. She beams with pure joy and shouts her answer, confessing that she loves him too. Bart stands frozen for a moment, stunned by the intensity of her response and the realization of his dream. They close the distance between them, the world fading away as they finally embrace. Bart gently holds her face and they share a tender kiss, sealing their promise under the light of the sun. Bart embraces Emmeline warmly, whispering her name as she gasps in surprise at the sudden intimacy. He smiles with pure affection, admitting that this moment truly feels like a dream come true. Emmeline is stunned by his rare expression, but he interrupts her thoughts to ask if she noticed he used her given name. Bart gazes at her intensely, asking for permission to continue calling her by her name from now on. He brings his hand to his lips in thought, reasoning that such familiarity is natural because they are now lovers. Emmeline stammers in embarrassment but happily agrees, repeating the word, lovers, with a blush. Bart suggests she drop the formal speech as well, but cuts the moment short when she sneezes from the cold. He takes her hand to warm it, gently suggesting they head back inside before she catches a chill. Emmeline focuses on the sensation of his hand, feeling his warmth seep into her. She realizes with a fluttering heart that this is the first time they have ever walked while holding hands. Bart agrees instantly when she shyly asks if they can take little walks like this sometimes in the future. Emmeline smiles to herself, realizing that she no longer has to hold back her feelings. She feels a profound sense of freedom, knowing she can finally be with Bart forever. Later in the library, Bart formally asks the Marquis for permission to marry Emmeline. The Marquis laughs heartily and embraces Bart, declaring there is no world where he wouldn't approve of the match. He explains that they must first get the king's consent and suggests starting the preparations immediately. The Marquis adds that they must inform the people, certain that the territory will be overjoyed by the news. Bart suddenly falls silent with a troubled look, prompting Emmeline to ask him what is wrong. He states firmly that while his feelings for her are second to none, doubt still lingers in his mind. Bart questions his own worthiness, wondering if a man of his status is truly fit to marry her. The Marquis reminds him that he has protected Emmeline without fail ever since their days at House Cresswell. He points directly at the knight, declaring that Bart is the only one capable of making her truly happy. Bart is struck by their confidence in him, chiding himself for losing heart when they recognize him so clearly. He decides to accept their words deeply, realizing he was the one lacking resolve. With renewed determination, Bart turns to Emmeline and extends his hand toward her. He swears a solemn oath to protect her and ensure her happiness for the rest of his life. Emmeline places her hand in his, promising that they will face and overcome whatever comes together. She whispers her thanks, her eyes filled with trust and love for him. Gossip spreads joyfully through the town as people celebrate the romance between the saint and her guard knight. Alma teases Bart in the hallway, warning him that he better keep their lady happy. Emmeline thanks her maid as Alma offers her heartfelt congratulations on the engagement. Surrounded by flowers and smiles, Emmeline feels overwhelmed by the blessing of everyone around them. 1 month later, the atmosphere turns tense as Emmeline asks the Marquis if there is still no news. The Marquis sits grimly at his desk, confirming that there has been absolutely no reply from the king regarding the marriage. Emmeline is stricken with anxiety, unable to understand why the approval is being withheld. She begins to panic, terrified that her dream of being with Bart is being threatened just when it seemed real. Bart steps in to comfort her, holding her close to steady her trembling. The Marquis instructs them to remain calm, promising to travel to the capital to petition in person if necessary. Emmeline nods obediently, trying to find strength in her grandfather's plan. Bart holds her silently, his expression dark as he contemplates the silence from the capital. Emmeline sits alone in the oppressive silence of her room, unable to shake the gnawing fear that something is wrong. She gazes at Bart's back in her imagination, terrified that their difference in status has finally created an unbridgeable wall. A chilling thought grips her that even the king might look down with disdain upon a class-mixed marriage. Staring into the mirror, she forces herself to be bright and cheerful so that her gloom does not burden Bart. She closes her eyes in fervent prayer, begging the spirits to let their marriage be approved. Bart walks heavily through the courtyard, the lack of an answer from the capital weighing like lead in his boots. 2 guards gossip by the gate, sharing the rumor that the king has refused to grant permission for the wedding. They openly question if a commoner with no political backing can truly support the future head of the Marquis. Since Emmeline is a beloved saint, they conclude that the public's suspicion naturally falls on her unworthy spouse. Bart overhears their cruel whispers and realizes that even with approval, his presence will only tarnish her reputation. Fury and resolve clash within him as he swears to himself that he will not be the one to drag her down. Desperate and cornered, he asks himself what a man without power can possibly do to save her from disgrace. He approaches Emmeline with a forced smile, proposing they hold the wedding on the frontier instead of the capital. Emmeline clasps her hands in delight, happy that he wants to plan ahead even if it seems a bit early. Her smile falters when she asks if it is too soon, confused by the sudden shift in his demeanor. Bart turns his back on her, coldly reminding her that they still do not actually have permission to marry. He walks away leaving a trail of ice, apologizing distantly while Emmeline stands frozen in confusion. Alone again, she wonders if her status makes his life painful and if she is pushing him too hard. She clutches her chest and suppresses the rising panic, telling herself they have overcome worse and will survive this too. A sudden noise at the gate interrupts her spiraling thoughts, drawing her attention to the entrance. Alma stands at the gate trying to block the intruders, complaining loudly about the disturbance. Emmeline stops dead in her tracks, her eyes widening in horror as she realizes who has arrived. Ignoring Alma's desperate cries to stop, she sprints toward the gate to confront the unwanted visitors. She slides to a halt before the intruders, demanding to know what business they could possibly have here. Her nightmare comes to life as her father and Lord Damien stand before her, crossing their arms with arrogant smirks. Emmeline is shocked to see her father and Lord Damien standing together at the frontier, demanding to know why they are here. Damien sneers at her with a condescending smile, calling her a foolish woman for deciding to marry Bart. She coldly tells them to leave immediately if they have no business there, stating this has nothing to do with them. Damien stops her by offering to reveal the real reason why His Majesty has not approved her marriage yet. Emmeline freezes in surprise, her eyes widening as the mention of the king's decision catches her off guard. Damien suggests they move the conversation inside the manor, warning that there are too many prying eyes out here. Emmeline feels a bad premonition but decides she must hear them out if they truly know something. She instructs Alma to show the guests to the parlor, steeling herself for whatever is about to happen. Once tea is served, Damien declares he will be blunt about the purpose of their visit. Her father delivers the devastating news that she absolutely cannot marry Bart. Emmeline grips her dress tightly, telling herself to stay calm because panicking would play right into his hands. She argues that there are precedents for commoners marrying into the nobility and her grandfather has already given his blessing. Damien slams his hand on the table, shouting at her to stop with the long-winded drivel. He yells that he cannot fathom why anyone would lower themselves to marry the likes of a servant. A twisted realization strikes Damien, and he smirks as he claims to understand her motivation. He disgustingly implies that she must turn into a different, lewd woman in bed to want such a man. Damien insults her further by remarking that even trash might have some use after all. Emmeline trembles with fury, wondering how far this man intends to go to insult her dignity. Damien announces he will tell them the truth to put the insolent mutt in his place. He drops the bombshell revelation that Bart is actually her half-brother. Emmeline stares in blank disbelief, unable to process the words and asking him to repeat himself. Her father claims that he also only learned of this fact recently. He confesses that in his youth, before marrying her mother, he practiced by forcing himself on a maid. He reveals that the maid disappeared afterward but was apparently pregnant with Bart at the time. Emmeline stammers in denial, refusing to believe such a convenient and horrible lie. Damien grins maliciously, pointing out that siblings cannot marry and the king would never grant permission for incest. Her father adds coldly that she should have just listened to him from the start. Emmeline calls him ridiculous, appalled that he took no responsibility for forcing himself on a woman and abandoning his child. She clenches her fist, demanding to know if he feels absolutely no shame standing before his children now. Her father dismisses her anger, arrogantly stating that she is the foolish one for questioning him. Emmeline recalls with bitterness how her father always appears to take everything away whenever she finally looks happy. Tears stream down her face as she asks why he goes this far just to sabotage her happiness. Damien interrupts to say that is exactly why he is here, dismissing the assault on the maid as common behavior for nobles. He lifts her chin and offers to save her from the filth of marrying her brother by marrying him instead. He demands she cede the future Marquis to him in exchange for his forgiveness and protection. Emmeline glares at him with intense hatred, vowing that she will not let his scheme slide. The Marquis intervenes, questioning if they have any actual proof beyond their own convenient story. He accuses them of fabricating the entire lie just to force Emmeline into an unwanted marriage with Damien. Damien scoffs at the accusation, warning the Marquis to be careful about what he says to them. He silences the room by revealing a letter sealed with the royal crest, asking if they recognize the king's authority. Count Bonham drops a bombshell report, revealing he had the fourth prince investigate a blood tie between himself and Bart. He smugly explains that the Royal Intelligence Network confirmed the connection, identifying Bart as his biological son. Marquis Garrett realizes Damien pulled strings with the fourth prince to orchestrate this cruel revelation. The Marquis defends Emmeline's right to choose, but grimly admits they cannot ignore a claim backed by royalty. Bonham sneers that he will not tolerate their defiance, agreeing to leave only because his damage is done. The intruders depart, leaving a trail of shattered peace as the door closes behind them. Grandfather turns to the frozen couple, his expression heavy with the weight of the situation. He reaches out to steady Emmeline, his voice cutting through the shock to offer comfort. Advising against rash decisions, he gently orders her to get some rest and process the news. A suffocating silence hangs between Bart and Emmeline as the reality of the accusations sinks in. Alone in her room, Emmeline grips the furniture, her mind violently rejecting the idea that they are siblings. She tries to rationalize his past protectiveness as brotherly, but her heart refuses to accept it. Collapsing onto the bed, she covers her mouth and admits that her love for him is far deeper than family. She stares at the ceiling in despair, realizing she cannot simply switch off her romantic feelings. A sudden knock jolts her from her misery, drawing her attention to the closed door. She opens it to find Bart standing there, his expression dark and filled with urgent resolve. He steps into the room, locking eyes with her as the tension in the air spikes. Bart clenches his fist and declares he has a truth she needs to hear, no matter the consequences. Emmeline gasps in confusion, clutching her brooch as the weight of the situation settles upon her. Bart stands before her looking visibly weighed down, his expression dark and troubled. Emmeline worries about his silence, realizing the rumor of them being siblings is tormenting him. She fears he has come to end their relationship, terrified he will say they can no longer be lovers. Bart attempts to retreat, politely suggesting that she must be tired and should rest for the night. He asks for forgiveness for his lack of consideration and turns to leave the room. Emmeline calls out to stop him, panic rising as she feels he is about to abandon her just like before. She demands that he tell her exactly what is on his mind, refusing to let him walk away in silence. Bart agrees quietly, and the scene shifts as they move to a more private space to talk. They enter the room, the heavy atmosphere following them as the door closes. Bart stares out the window into the night, admitting he doesn't even know what face to make right now. He confesses that he still cannot bring himself to believe that they are actually siblings. Emmeline agrees softly, stating that she shares his disbelief regarding their alleged blood relation. Bart grimly notes that since the royal inquiry declared it, they may have no choice but to accept the verdict. He clenches his hand on the railing, acknowledging that they cannot deny a royal finding without definite evidence. Bart explains that he has always viewed her as someone precious whom he must protect at all costs. He admits that, in a way, one could say he thought of her like a younger sister to protect. Emmeline freezes at his words, her heart sinking at the implication of a familial bond. Bart questions himself, wondering if that means he is willing to accept living as her brother. He abruptly stops that train of thought, his expression hardening as he rejects the idea immediately. He realizes that if they were siblings, she would eventually marry someone else and walk a different path. Tears fill his eyes as he admits that watching her belong to another would hurt more than being alone. He grips his sword belt, his resolve firming as he refuses to accept that future. A realization strikes him, clarifying the true nature of his feelings amidst the confusion. He clenches his fist, understanding with certainty that he has never once looked at her as a sister. He gazes at her with intense longing, confessing that he has always wanted to touch, hold, and kiss her. He embraces the truth of his desires, finally accepting that his feelings are far from platonic. Bart pulls her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her hair as he whispers that he loves her. He declares that he despises the thought of her marrying another man because he wants her for himself. Emmeline cries, revealing that she thought everyone she loved, like her parents, would eventually leave her side. She clutches the magical gemstone, sobbing that she was terrified he would disappear too. Bart holds her face gently, vowing to stay by her side always and never leave her. Their intimate moment is interrupted as the door suddenly swings open. The Marquis bursts in, calling Emmeline's name loudly and shattering the romantic atmosphere. Emmeline and Bart spring apart in shock, looking flustered by the sudden intrusion. The Marquis asks if he is disturbing them, though he seems more focused on his own agenda. He clears his throat awkwardly, seemingly noticing the tension he just interrupted. He requests that they both come to his study immediately to sort out the sibling situation. Tea is poured as the Marquis states bluntly that he cannot bring himself to believe they share the same father. He asks Bart if his mother ever mentioned anything, to which Bart replies sadly that she said nothing. Emmeline turns to Alma, urging the maid to share any thoughts or details she might have about the situation. Alma admits that she does not believe Bart is actually the son of the Viscount who raised them. She explains that while she resembles their mother, Bart looks nothing like the Viscountess, suggesting he takes after his true father. Emmeline realizes that if they can find a noble who resembles Bart, they will find his biological father. She concludes that since Bart possesses magic, his father must be of noble blood, making the capital the best place to search. Alma suddenly reveals that she saw a noble in the capital who bore a striking resemblance to Bart. The room falls into stunned silence as the group processes this unexpected lead. Alma describes the identical features she saw, recalling a specific incident involving Lord Damien a few months ago. In the flashback, Damien is shown screaming in a public street that his clothes have been dirted. Alma narrates how Damien had bumped into a child and reacted with characteristic cruelty. Just as Damien raises his hand to strike the child, a mysterious figure grabs his arm to stop him. The stranger coldly tells Damien he has no interest in his lectures, holding his ground firmly. Damien stares in shock at the man's face, faltering as he recognizes him and calls him brother. Back in the present, Emmeline gasps in disbelief as the implications of the story sink in. Alma confirms the identity of the mystery man, stating he is the Bonham family's heir and Damien's elder brother. Emmeline is left speechless, staring into space as the truth of Bart's lineage becomes undeniable. Alma drops a startling possibility, suggesting that Bart looks unexpectedly like the eldest son of the Bonham family. Emmeline recalls meeting Damien's older brother, realizing his hair color and vibe do indeed match Bart's. The group is stunned by the implication that Bart's father might be a member of the prestigious Bonham family. Bart falls silent, his expression unreadable as he processes the shock of this potential lineage. He clutches his head in distress, admitting that it is hard to believe such an unexpected connection exists. Bart expresses reluctance to accept sharing blood with the family that harassed Emmeline, though he admits he could be mistaken. The Marquis muses that given the circumstances, the theory may not be as far-fetched as it initially seems. He reveals that something about House Bonham has actually been nagging at him for some time as well. The Marquis declares he will investigate Bart's origins himself to uncover the truth. Emmeline blushes and thanks her grandfather sincerely for his willingness to help them. However, the Marquis warns them not to get their hopes up, noting that cooperation is far from guaranteed. He explains that since Damien is likely to interfere, the chances of uncovering more than the royal report are slim. If Damien is colluding with the Fourth Prince as suspected, their options for a legal resolution may be exhausted. Shifting gears, the Marquis suggests they must weigh their practical options aside from the investigation. He holds up 3 fingers, announcing that he sees 3 possible routes for them to take. The Marquis tells Emmeline that each path has pros and cons, leaving the final choice up to her. Emmeline and Bart listen intently, steeling themselves to hear the difficult choices ahead. The first option is to give up the marriage entirely and return to their previous master and knight relationship. Emmeline immediately rejects this, stating she cannot fake her feelings when Bart is irreplaceable to her. Bart agrees without hesitation, affirming that he feels exactly the same way about her. The Marquis laughs, admitting he expected as much, and proceeds to the second option. He suggests she take a husband for namesake only while keeping Bart as her lover on the side. Emmeline is struck speechless, her mind going blank at the outrageous suggestion. She demands to know what on earth her grandfather is saying, completely baffled by the idea. Emmeline vehemently refuses to make Bart a side lover, while the Marquis argues it is common noble practice. He explains that many nobles who cannot marry their true love quietly accept this arrangement to be together. The Marquis points out that while not ideal, it would still allow them to spend their lives together. Emmeline is horrified, thinking that she despises the idea of marrying anyone other than Bart. She argues that forcing Bart to live in the shadows would cause him to be scorned by society. Bart suddenly interrupts, asking if he may ask a question regarding that scenario. He asks if his presence in the estate as a lover would bring trouble upon the Marquis. The Marquis admits it would be difficult to arrange, leaving Emmeline shocked by Bart's line of questioning. Bart declares that if becoming a lover is what it takes to stay by her side, he is willing to accept it. Emmeline gasps, staring at him in disbelief as he voices his resolve to endure the stigma. He states firmly that nothing matters more to him than Lady Emmeline's happiness. Emmeline clasps her hands, overwhelmed by the realization that he cares for her deeply enough to sacrifice his pride. She trembles, touched by his devotion but knowing deep down that something is wrong. With a pained expression, she tells him clearly that such an arrangement would not make her happy. Emmeline refuses any happiness bought with his sacrifice, reminding him that he was the one who supported her when she was shunned. The Marquis watches them with a gentle smile, telling them there is no need to rush their decision just yet. The Marquis holds up 3 fingers to command their attention, announcing that a critical third option exists to solve their dilemma. He reveals a solution powerful enough to overturn the royal inquiry, offering a definitive test to verify their true blood relation. His expression turns grave as he issues a final warning, stating clearly that once they begin, there is no turning back. He explains the devastating consequences, warning that if they are siblings, they can never be lovers or even master and servant again. Despite the risk of losing everything, he asks if they still want the truth, and Emmeline quietly affirms that she does. Doubt lingers in her mind as she looks away, terrified by the possibility that the rumors might actually be true. Bart reaches out silently, his hand sliding over hers to interrupt her spiraling thoughts. He squeezes her hand tightly, his touch offering a silent promise of support that pulls her back from despair. Emmeline's eyes light up with renewed conviction, her fear vanishing as she realizes she is ready to face the truth. She turns to her grandfather and declares that she will pursue even the smallest sliver of hope for a future with Bart. Clasping hands, they stand united against the world, declaring that they are no longer afraid of the outcome. The Marquis smiles with deep satisfaction, praising their courage and accepting their resolve. Emmeline asks what must be done, and he admits the method is difficult but the only way to prove their lineage. He reveals they must undergo a high-stakes appraisal at the temple, supervised by the very royals who doubt them. The Marquis reveals the final remaining option to verify their blood ties is an official appraisal at the temple. He explains that a specific magic exists to test blood kinship in cases where a great magical line faces extinction. Since the market is required to appraise newborns, Emmeline realizes she underwent this rite as a child. However, she worries the priests won't take them seriously since they are mere nobles asking for the sake of marriage. Emmeline looks down in despair, fearing that even this path to the truth might be closed to them. The Marquis reveals a strategic opening, noting that Damien and the 4th prince are the key. He explains that Damien's interference and connection to the prince creates a unique opportunity. If Damien believes the appraisal will expose their blood ties and ruin them, he will surely push for it. The Marquis plans to steer them into setting up the appraisal themselves, using the prince's rank to bypass restrictions. Emmeline understands the risky gamble of manipulating their enemies into doing exactly what they want. The Marquis admits he cannot guarantee success, but if they pull it off, the outcome will be perfect. He confidently states that political maneuvering is his specialty, having swayed the crown and lords many times before. With a reassuring look, he asks them to trust his hand and leave the scheme entirely to him. Emmeline smiles, recalling that her grandfather never says, "It can't be done," no matter how dire the situation. She reflects on how his unwavering strength has carried her through so many hardships in the past. The Marquis cracks his knuckles, ready to work his old bones, while Emmeline bows and counts on him. He smiles gently at his granddaughter, declaring his absolute belief in her. He asserts with certainty that she and Bart are destined to be together. The Marquis envisions a future where the two of them protect the land together side by side. Bart and Emmeline stand together with a shared resolve, agreeing that this future is their prayer as well. A few weeks later, Damien bangs on the gate, screaming for Emmeline to come out. He yells furiously that he asked the crown to investigate for her sake, outraged that she is ignoring his efforts. Emmeline calmly ignores the noise outside while the maid assures her that the guard will send him away. Alma enters with yet another letter from Lord Damien, and Emmeline asks her to dispose of it immediately. Alma notes he writes the same threat every day, warning that they are preparing to announce the sibling relationship. Emmeline realizes that Damien's threats imply grandfather's plan is working and the appraisal is being prepared. She decides to welcome this development, resolving to keep her head steady and wait for their chance. However, a shadow of anxiety crosses her face as the weight of the waiting game takes its toll. Alma suddenly squeezes her hand tight, sensing her lady's silent distress. She calls out to her lady, drawing Emmeline's attention away from her dark thoughts. Alma performs a small gesture with her hands, casting a playful or comforting spell. She looks into Emmeline's eyes and pleads with her not to carry this heavy burden alone. Alma reminds her that she is by her side and urges her to speak without holding anything back. Emmeline tries to brush it off, but Alma interrupts to ask if she may share a secret of her own. With a serious expression, Alma confesses that she has been secretly getting back at Lord Damien. She explains that she reached her limit seeing him send letters day after day without caring for Emmeline's feelings. Alma reveals that whenever she disposes of the letters, she spends an hour praying for Damien to face retribution. Emmeline bursts into laughter, amused by the idea of Alma casting a little spell of vengeance. Alma blushes, admitting she just wanted to protect her lady in her own way. Emmeline smiles brightly, thanking Alma for lifting her spirits when she was getting worn down. Emmeline sits with Alma, clarifying that her hesitation isn't because she has cold feet about the wedding. She reflects on her attempt to leave her past behind, having broken her engagement and said goodbye to her controlling father. Despair creeps in as she feels them chasing her, trying to steal the small happiness she has finally found. She admits her terrifying fear that the upcoming appraisal might actually confirm the lie that destroys her future. Alma firmly embraces her, cutting through the fear with a sharp denial that such a tragedy will ever happen. Tears well in Emmeline's eyes as Alma assures her that the entire market is praying for her happiness with all their hearts. Strengthened by their support, Emmeline wipes her tears and declares she will blow off this petty harassment. She resolves to be strong, refusing to let the malicious rumors dictate her life any longer. The next day, Hannah tries to bar the entry of the Viscount and his wife, only to be verbally abused and ordered aside. Emmeline descends the stairs with regal grace, confronting her father who demands she show herself. The Viscount explodes in rage, calling her an ungrateful child for treating her own parents with such disrespect. Emmeline silences him with a cold glare, activating her magic to assert her dominance and telling him to know his place. The Viscountess watches in stunned silence as the once docile girl stands up to them. Emmeline addresses Viscountess Cresswell directly, commanding her to be silent in the presence of her superior. She reminds them that as the sole named heir of House Garrett, her rank far exceeds that of a mere Viscount. Exercising her authority, she bans them from ever setting foot on the Margate grounds again. With a final icy command, she orders them to leave immediately. As they retreat in humiliation, she warns that she will not lift a finger to help them if anything happens. Watching them flee, she recalls with bitterness that they never once helped her when she was the one in need. Hannah and Bart rush to her side, praising her splendid display of authority and strength. The Marquis approaches them, having witnessed the entire confrontation with silent approval. He beams with pride, declaring that with her head held that high, he has no worries about her facing the temple. He reveals that the fourth prince has summoned them to conduct the appraisal, ordering a departure at dawn. Emmeline accepts the order with a fierce determination, ready to face the final trial. As the sun sets, she steels herself for the journey, knowing it is finally time to settle this once and for all.